Picture a continent veiled in time, a vast landscape where empires rose and fell long before European ships ever touched its shores. This is the ancient Americas, a world that whispers to us through silent stone cities, intricate artworks, and artifacts whose purposes we can only guess at. We often think we know the grand sweep of human history, but here, beneath the jungles and deserts, lie secrets that challenge everything. These aren't just forgotten tales. They are profound enigmas carved into the very earth, waiting for us to listen. What if the story we've been told is incomplete? What if the true narrative of human achievement in these lands is far more mysterious and magnificent than we ever imagined? This journey takes us beyond the textbook summaries into the heart of the unknown. We will walk the same paths as ancient engineers who moved mountains of earth with astonishing precision, and stand before structures aligned with the stars with an accuracy that defies simple explanation. We will encounter evidence of technologies that seem out of place in their time, and civilizations that vanished, leaving behind only cryptic clues to their existence. Each of these 25 mysteries is a piece of a colossal puzzle, a fragment of a story that refuses to be neatly solved. Just when a new discovery seems to provide an answer, it inevitably unravels to reveal even deeper, more compelling questions. This is not a history of settled facts, but a living, breathing detective story spanning thousands of years. So, prepare to have your curiosity ignited and your perspective shifted. We are about to venture into a realm where every carved symbol, every abandoned metropolis, and every unearthed relic holds the potential to rewrite our understanding of the past. This is an invitation to explore the gaps in the map, to wonder at the ingenuity of cultures whose voices echo through the centuries. The mysteries of the ancient Americas are a testament to human ambition and the enduring power of the unknown. Let's begin this exploration together and see what wonders we can uncover. Our first mystery takes us high above the plains of southern Peru, to one of the most visually arresting and baffling creations of the ancient world. Carved into the dark, stony surface of the Nazca Desert are enormous lines and figures so vast that their true form can only be appreciated from the sky. These are the Nazca Lines, a sprawling collection of geoglyphs that have captivated and confused observers for nearly a century. Created by the Nazca culture between 500 before Common Era and 500 Common Era, the lines were made by simply removing the reddish-brown iron oxide-coated pebbles that cover the landscape, revealing the lighter-colored earth beneath. This technique, while simple in concept, resulted in a monumental achievement. We are not looking at small sketches, but designs on a colossal scale. The straight lines run for miles, crisscrossing the desert with geometric precision, while the biomorphic figures depict animals like a 120-foot-long hummingbird, a massive monkey with a spiral tail, and a whale, alongside flowers, trees, and even a strange humanoid figure often nicknamed the astronaut. The sheer scale of this undertaking is what makes the mystery so profound. The artists who created these works could never have seen them in their entirety. They were working blind, guided by mathematical principles and a deep understanding of scaling that allowed them to transfer small models into these gigantic desert drawings. This fact alone fuels the central question: why would a people go to such extraordinary effort to create art that they themselves could never fully behold? The most enduring theory suggests an astronomical purpose. Some researchers propose that the lines functioned as a giant calendar, with certain key lines pointing toward the sun, moon, and stars at significant times of the year, marking solstices and guiding agricultural cycles. The desert floor acts as a perfect, unchanging canvas for tracking celestial movements. Another compelling idea is that the lines were sacred pathways, walked by priests during ritual ceremonies to pray for water, an incredibly precious resource in the arid climate. The figures may have represented deities or animal spirits, and traversing the lines was a way to communicate with them. A more radical, though less supported, theory posits that the lines were landing strips or signals for extraterrestrial visitors, an idea born from the fact that they are best viewed from above. While this captures the imagination, archaeologists generally point to the sophisticated cultural practices of the Nazca people themselves as a more likely explanation. Perhaps the very act of creation was the purpose, a massive, communal effort that reinforced social bonds and religious beliefs. Visualize drone footage gliding over the hummingbird, its wingspan stretching across the landscape, or following the relentless straightness of a line that vanishes over the horizon. This grandeur only deepens the enigma. The Nazca Lines stand as a testament to human ingenuity, a message etched into the planet itself, but the message itself remains just out of reach, a beautiful and silent secret kept by the desert for over 1,500 years. Leaving the vast, open deserts of Peru, our journey now plunges us into the dense, humid jungles of Central America, where a civilization of staggering intellectual and artistic achievement simply walked away from its own glory. The disappearance of the classic Maya civilization stands as one of history's most haunting and complex enigmas. For centuries, from around 250 to 900 Common Era, the Maya flourished, constructing city-states like Tikal, Palenque, and Capan that were marvels of urban planning. Theirs was a world of step pyramids piercing the forest canopy, ornate palaces, and ball courts where a sacred and often deadly game was played. They developed a sophisticated calendar system, a complex form of hieroglyphic writing, and made breathtaking advances in astronomy, accurately tracking the cycles of Venus and predicting solar eclipses. Then, within a relatively short period, the heart of this civilization simply stopped beating. The great stone stelae, carved with dates and the deeds of kings, ceased to be erected. The monumental centers were abandoned, and the jungle began its slow, patient work of reclaiming stone and memory. This was not a single, cataclysmic event that wiped out an entire people. Instead, it was a protracted and deeply unsettling collapse of a political and social order. Archaeologists see it in the archaeological record as a flickering out of the royal court culture that defined the classic period. In a city like Capan, in modern-day Honduras, studies of skeletal remains show a dramatic increase in malnutrition and disease among the common population in the years leading up to the abandonment. The final dated monument at the city was erected in 822 Common Era. After that, the voices of the kings fall silent. At Tikal, in Guatemala, one of the most powerful Maya cities, the last recorded date on a monument is 869 Common Era. The elite, the scribes, the architects, the very class that sustained this high culture seem to have simply dispersed, leaving their magnificent palaces and temples to the elements. So, what could have caused such a profound societal failure? The leading theory points to a perfect storm of environmental and human factors, with severe, prolonged drought at its center. Analysis of sediment cores from lakes in the region reveals that the Maya experienced a series of intense dry periods, or megadroughts, precisely during the 9th century, when the collapse accelerated. For a society heavily dependent on rainwater for agriculture and drinking water, this would have been catastrophic. Crop yields would have plummeted, leading to famine, social unrest, and a loss of faith in the ruling class. The Maya kings derived their power from their perceived ability to communicate with the gods and intercede for things like rain. When the rains failed, generation after generation, that divine mandate would have evaporated, undermining the entire political structure. Warfare also appears to have escalated dramatically in this final period. The archaeological evidence shows that defensive walls were hastily constructed around major centers, and hieroglyphic texts speak of increased conflict between rival city-states, not for conquest, but for the capture of prisoners for sacrifice. This shift from ritualized combat to more desperate, destructive warfare further strained resources and destabilized the region. It's likely that the combination of drought, famine, and constant warfare created a feedback loop of crisis from which the complex and densely populated classic Maya system could not recover. The people didn't vanish, they simply left the grand urban centers, migrating to the coasts or smaller, more sustainable villages, reverting to a simpler way of life. The civilization, as it had been defined, collapsed, but the Maya people endured. Walking through the ruins of Tikal today, with howler monkeys roaring in the canopy above the towering temples, you feel the profound mystery of this abandonment. It's a powerful reminder that even the most brilliant and established civilizations are not immune to the pressures of their environment and the consequences of their own political choices. The silence of these stone cities speaks volumes about the fragility of human achievement, but from the silent abandonment of Maya cities, we travel even further back in time, to the very cradle of civilization in Mesoamerica, where we encounter a mystery carved in solid stone. Scattered across the swampy lowlands of what is now the Mexican Gulf Coast stand 17 immense, brooding faces. These are the Olmec colossal heads, and they are the work of a culture so ancient that they are considered the mother civilization of all that followed in the region, from the Maya to the Aztecs. The Olmec flourished from around 1200 to 400 before Common Era, and their achievements are staggering, but nothing captures the imagination quite like these massive sculptures. Each head is a single block of basalt, a volcanic stone, with the largest weighing in at an almost unbelievable 20 to 40 tons. They stand up to 11 feet tall, and each one possesses a unique, individualized face, wearing what appears to be a protective helmet, often adorned with distinctive emblems. The first layer of this mystery is a question of sheer logistics. The basalt used to create these heads did not come from the Olmec heartland. It was quarried from the Tuxtla Mountains, dozens of miles away from the ceremonial centers like San Lorenzo and Levante, where the heads were ultimately placed. The Olmec did not have the wheel, nor did they have domesticated animals like oxen or horses capable of pulling such loads. So how did they move a 40-ton block of stone across rivers, through swamps, and over uneven terrain? The prevailing theory is a demonstration of remarkable communal effort and ingenuity. Archaeologists suggest the Olmec may have used a combination of rollers made from logs, sledges, and ropes, potentially transporting the stones on rafts along rivers for part of the journey. Imagine the scene: hundreds, perhaps thousands, of workers laboring for weeks or months, chanting in unison as they inched these gargantuan boulders across the landscape. This was not just an artistic project. It was a powerful statement of social organization and the authority of the rulers who could command such a workforce. And this leads to the second great question: who are these formidable individuals staring out across the centuries? The consensus is that they almost certainly depict powerful Olmec rulers. The distinct facial features, some with broad, flat noses and thick lips. Others with different expressions and headgear suggest they are portraits of specific, real-life leaders. They are not idealized gods, but men of immense power and status, immortalized in the most durable material their culture could access. The helmets they wear are thought to be the protective gear of the Mesoamerican ballgame, a ritual sport with deep religious and political significance that would be adopted by all subsequent civilizations in the area. By depicting themselves in this regalia, these rulers were likely associating their power with the sacred nature of the game and the cosmos it represented. The cultural significance of the heads is profound. Their creation and placement at the heart of Olmec cities were acts of political propaganda and religious devotion. They served as permanent, unavoidable reminders of the ruler's authority, his connection to the gods, and his ability to mobilize the entire community. A close-up view reveals the incredible skill of Olmec craftsmen. The features are rendered with a stunning realism and attention to detail: the subtle curve of a lip, the set of a jaw, the thoughtful or stern gaze. Some heads even show carefully carved pupils, giving them a startlingly lifelike presence. When you stand before one, you are not just looking at a sculpture. You are face to face with a king from a world 3,000 years removed from our own. The Olmec heads are more than art. They are the bedrock of Mesoamerican civilization, and their silent, stoic presence embodies the mystery of how such a sophisticated culture emerged, fully formed, at the very dawn of history in the Americas. Yet while the Olmec heads represent the dawn of monumental sculpture, another mystery, high in the Andes, showcases a mastery of stone that seems to defy the very limitations of the tools available. On the windswept, high-altitude plains of Bolivia, near the shores of Lake Titicaca, lie the ruins of Tiwanaku. This was the center of a powerful empire that predated the Inca by centuries, and at its heart stands one of the most perplexing artifacts of the ancient Americas, the Gate of the Sun. Carved from a single, enormous block of andesite stone weighing an estimated 10 tons, this monolithic arch is a masterpiece of both engineering and symbolic art. To stand before it is to witness a puzzle carved in stone, a testament to a culture with knowledge we are still struggling to comprehend. The most immediate mystery lies in the gate's construction. The stone itself was quarried from a site many miles away, and like the Olmec, the Tiwanaku people achieved this feat without the wheel or draft animals. But it is the precision of the stone cutting that truly astonishes. The surfaces are perfectly flat, the corners are sharp and true, and the entire structure exhibits a geometric rigor that rivals, and in some ways even surpasses, the famous masonry of the later Inca. The Tiwanaku builders used a technique involving stone hammers and abrasive sand to slowly grind the andesite into shape, a process requiring immense patience and skill. Yet the result is so precise that it has fueled speculation about lost technologies or advanced knowledge of stone working that has since been forgotten. The gate is not merely a slab. It is a complex architectural form with a central doorway and intricate recesses, all executed with a flawless accuracy that would be challenging to replicate even with modern tools. But the true enigma of the Gate of the Sun is the elaborate frieze carved across its top portion. At the center stands a figure often identified as the staff god, a deity holding a staff in each hand, with rays emanating from its head that are sometimes interpreted as tears. This central figure is surrounded by a procession of 48 smaller, winged figures, 32 with human faces and 16 with condor heads, all running inward toward the central deity. For many decades, the prevailing theory has been that this intricate carving functions as a complex calendar. Some researchers have proposed that it represents a 12-month solar calendar, with each of the 32 human figures corresponding to a specific day in a month. Others see it as a unisolar calendar, tracking the cycles of both the sun and the moon, with the symbols providing a way for priests to predict solstices, equinoxes, and agricultural cycles. The alignment of the gate itself is also significant. It is positioned so that on the spring equinox, the rising sun would shine directly through the doorway, illuminating the central figure in a dramatic display of light and shadow. This celestial connection strongly supports the idea of the gate being a sacred timekeeping device. However, this calendar theory is not without its challengers, and the debate over the gate's original purpose is far from settled. A significant complication is that the gate was almost certainly not originally standing where it is today. When European chroniclers first recorded it in the 16th century, it was lying broken and horizontal amidst the ruins. The current upright position is a modern reconstruction. This means we cannot be entirely sure of its original orientation or its relationship to other structures in the city. Some archaeologists argue that the gate was not a freestanding monument, but was instead set into a massive wall that was part of a large, pyramid-like structure called the Akapana. In this view, the gate may have served as a ceremonial entrance to a highly restricted sacred space, and the carving could be a depiction of a creation myth or a portrayal of a pantheon of gods, with the smaller figures representing ancestral spirits or specific deities paying homage to the supreme staff god. The calendar might then be a metaphorical representation of cosmic order rather than a literal tool for tracking time. This ongoing debate only deepens the allure of the Gate of the Sun. Was it an astronomical observatory, a sacred text carved in stone for priests to read the heavens, or was it a theological statement, a grand entranceway that framed rituals and communicated the power of the Tiwanaku state and its divine ruler? The truth may encompass all these ideas. The gate stands as a powerful symbol of a civilization that viewed the cosmos, time, and divinity as inextricably linked. Its precise construction mirrors the perceived order of the universe, and its enigmatic carvings invite us to understand a world where engineering and spirituality were one and the same. It is a silent sentinel from a lost empire, challenging us to decode a message that has weathered centuries under the boundless Bolivian sky. Leaving the high Andes and the stone mysteries of Tiwanaku, we now travel north, to the very heart of what is now the United States, where a city of staggering scale once rivaled any in the world. Around the year 1000 Common Era, a vast urban center flourished along the Mississippi River, directly across from modern-day St. Louis. This was Cahokia, the largest pre-Columbian settlement north of Mexico. At its peak, It was home to as many as 20,000 people, a population that would not be surpassed by any city in the United States until the late 1700s. The most dramatic testament to Cahokia's power and sophistication is not a towering temple of stone, but an immense earthen pyramid known today as Monk's Mound. This structure is a true colossus of the ancient world. It covers 14 acres at its base and rises 100 feet high, making it the largest man-made earthen mound in the Americas. Built entirely by hand, basket load by basket load of soil, Monk's Mound was the central focus of the city, a platform for the residents of the ruling elite and the temples where they communicated with the spirit world. Climbing its 4 terraces, one would have looked out over a bustling metropolis of thatched roof houses, plazas, and smaller mounds, a scene of immense political and ceremonial activity. But the mystery of Cahokia deepens when we look beyond the Great Mound itself. On the western edge of the Grand Plaza, archaeologists discovered evidence of a structure that has drawn inevitable comparisons to its famous namesake in England, a woodhenge. This was not a circle of stone, but a series of large, upright red cedar posts arranged in a wide circle, with a central observation post. The Cahokia woodhenge was not a single construction. Evidence suggests it was rebuilt several times over the centuries, with each version containing a different number of posts, often 48 or 60. The purpose of this structure, however, appears to have been profoundly astronomical. From the central observation point, the rising sun on the equinoxes would align perfectly with a specific post, marking the beginning of spring and autumn. Other posts likely aligned with the sun's position at the summer and winter solstices, creating a sophisticated calendar etched into the landscape. This was a practical tool for a society dependent on agriculture, allowing priests or rulers to precisely determine the optimal times for planting and harvest. But it was also much more. This celestial calendar would have reinforced the authority of the ruling class, who could claim the power to predict and influence the cycles of the sun itself. The woodhenge transformed the cosmos into a visible, measurable part of daily life, grounding Cahokia's spiritual and political power in the immutable movements of the heavens. The society that built this astonishing city is now called the Mississippian culture, and their influence stretched across much of eastern North America. Yet, for all its grandeur, Cahokia's dominance was relatively brief. By the mid-1300s, the city was in a state of serious decline, and by 1400, it was completely abandoned. The question of why this great metropolis fell is as compelling as the story of its rise. There was no single invading army, no evidence of a sudden catastrophe. Instead, the collapse seems to have been a slow unraveling, likely driven by a combination of environmental and social pressures. One leading theory points to climate change. Tree ring data suggests that during the 13th and 14th centuries, the region experienced a period of extended droughts, which would have placed tremendous strain on Cahokia's agricultural base. A city of 20,000 people requires a massive, reliable food surplus, and a failure of the corn crops could have led to famine, social unrest, and a breakdown of the political order that held the society together. Another significant factor may have been resource depletion. The sheer density of the population would have placed enormous demands on the local environment. Forests were cleared for building materials and fuel, leading to deforestation and soil erosion. The game animals that supplemented their diet would have been hunted to scarcity in the immediate area. This overexploitation of the land could have made the region increasingly unsustainable for such a large, centralized population. There is also archaeological evidence of increasing conflict in the later years. Palisades, large, defensive walls made of timber, were constructed around the central ceremonial precinct, suggesting a rising threat of warfare, either from external groups or from internal factional strife. The very success of Cahokia may have sown the seeds of its downfall, as its growing population and consumption outstripped the capacity of the land to support it. The people likely did not vanish. They probably dispersed into smaller, more sustainable communities across the Mississippi Valley, leaving the Great Mounds and the silent woodhenge as monuments to a past era of centralized power. The story of Cahokia is a powerful and sobering mystery. a reminder that even the most impressive civilizations are deeply connected to their environment, and that the factors that enable a society to flourish can, when pushed to their limit, also lead to its fragmentation. Yet for every mystery grounded in the monumental labors of ancient peoples, there exists another born from the allure of a captivating story that may not be what it seems. This brings us to one of the most iconic and debated artifacts to emerge from the public's fascination with the unknown, the crystal skulls of Mesoamerica. These hauntingly beautiful objects, carved from a single block of clear or milky quartz, have become entrenched in popular culture as symbols of ancient wisdom, psychic power, and even extraterrestrial contact. They are often depicted as being thousands of years old, created by the Maya or the Aztecs with a level of precision that defies explanation. The legend suggests that there are 13 such skulls, and if they are ever reunited, they will reveal profound secrets about humanity's past and future. It's a powerful and enchanting narrative, but the truth behind these artifacts is a fascinating mystery of a different kind, one involving modern ingenuity, clever deception, and our own enduring desire for magic. The story of the crystal skulls as ancient relics began in the late 19th century, a period of intense fascination with archaeology and the exotic. The most famous specimen, the Mitchell-Hedges skull, was reportedly discovered in 1924 by the adopted daughter of British adventurer F. A. Mitchell-Hedges during an expedition to the Maya city of Lubuntan in Belize. The story goes that the 17-year-old Anna LeGillin discovered the perfectly shaped skull, with its removable jaw, beneath a collapsed altar. This account, with its dramatic discovery by a young woman in a lost city, captured the public imagination and set the standard for the skull's legendary status. Other skulls surfaced around the same time, often appearing on the art market with vague or unverifiable histories. They were quickly attributed to Aztec or Maya artisans, and tales of their supernatural properties began to circulate. Proponents claimed the skulls could harness great psychic energy, that they emitted a strange hum, or that they could cause visions. They were said to be impossible to have been carved with the stone tools available to ancient Mesoamerican cultures, pointing to their flawless surfaces and a lack of microscopic tool marks as proof of a lost technology. It is precisely this claim of impossibility that led scientists to subject the skulls to rigorous analysis. Beginning in the 1970s and accelerating with more advanced technology in the 2000s, researchers from institutions like the British Museum and the Smithsonian used scanning electron microscopes to examine the surfaces of the most famous skulls. What they found was definitive. The microscopic patterns of abrasion and polishing on the quartz were consistent with the use of rotary wheels and industrial-grade diamond-tipped drills, tools that did not exist in the Americas before the arrival of Europeans. The quartz itself, while ancient, showed no signs of the weathering one would expect from an object buried for centuries. Furthermore, historical research revealed a telling detail. There is not a single documented crystal skull that was ever unearthed in a legitimate, scientifically conducted archaeological excavation. Not one. All of them appeared mysteriously on the commercial market in the 19th century, a time when there was a roaring European and American appetite for pre-Columbian antiquities. The evidence overwhelmingly points to a different origin. They were almost certainly crafted in workshops in Germany, and possibly France, in the mid to late 1800s. These skilled artisans, likely in the city of Idar-Oberstein, a centuries-old center for gem cutting, used advanced lapidary techniques to create these objects specifically for a hungry collector's market. They were exquisite fakes, born from commerce rather than ceremony. So why did the myth of the crystal skulls become so powerful and enduring? The answer lies in a potent combination of timing and human psychology. The late 19th century was the dawn of theosophy and spiritualism, movements that sought ancient wisdom and connection to other realms. The idea of a beautifully crafted, mysterious object from a lost civilization perfectly fit this romantic, mystical worldview. In the 20th century, the skulls were adopted by the New Age movement, which amplified their purported psychic properties and tied them to prophecies of global transformation. They became symbols of a universal, alternative history that stood in opposition to what some saw as the dry, soulless narrative of mainstream archaeology. The skulls offered a tangible connection to a past that felt more mysterious and spiritually significant. They also tapped into a deeper, cross-cultural fascination with the human skull itself, a potent symbol of mortality, knowledge, and the seat of consciousness. The true mystery of the crystal skulls, then, is not their ancient origin, but their powerful hold on our collective imagination. They are a case study in how a compelling story can often overshadow factual evidence. They remind us that our interpretation of the past is constantly being shaped by the desires and beliefs of the present. While they may not be the relics of a lost world, they have become genuine artifacts of our own modern culture's relationship with history, mystery, and the longing for a connection to something greater than ourselves. They stand as a testament not to ancient Maya wisdom, but to the enduring human capacity for wonder and the stories we tell to make sense of the world. Yet while the crystal skulls represent a mystery born from modern myth-making, our next legends are rooted in a historical obsession so powerful it drove men to their doom in the relentless pursuit of a dream. The tales of El Dorado and Petiti are perhaps the most famous and enduring legends of the ancient Americas, stories of unimaginable wealth that lured European conquistadors deep into uncharted jungles and mountains. But these are not just stories of greed. They are complex narratives that blend a kernel of historical truth with centuries of exaggeration, wishful thinking, and the tragic collision of two worlds. The story of El Dorado, the Golden One, begins not with a city, but with a person and a spectacular ritual. High in the Andes of what is now Colombia, the Muisca people practiced a ceremony to anoint a new chief. The event took place at Lake Guatavita, a deep, circular lake nestled in the mountains. As described by Spanish chroniclers, the heir to the chieftainship would be covered from head to toe in a sticky resin and then blown with gold dust through tubes, transforming him into a living, shimmering golden man. He would then be taken out on a raft made of rushes, laden with gold and emeralds as offerings to the gods. As the raft reached the center of the lake, the cacique, or chief, would dive into the water, washing the gold dust from his body while his attendants threw the magnificent treasures into the lake as a sacrifice. This was the original El Dorado, a ritual of investiture, not a place. When the Spanish heard fragments of this story from other indigenous groups, their imaginations, already fueled by the plunder of the Aztec and Inca empires, ran wild. The tale was distorted and inflated as it was passed along. The Golden Man became a Golden King, and that king was said to rule a city of gold. That city grew in the European mind into an entire empire of immeasurable wealth, hidden somewhere in the vast, unexplored interior of South America. For over 2 centuries, this phantom city became an obsession. Expeditions led by famous conquistadors like Gonzalo Pizarro and Gonzalo Jimenez de Quesada plunged into the sweltering jungles of the Amazon basin, suffering unimaginable hardships, disease, starvation, attacks from indigenous peoples, and the relentless, disorienting environment. Thousands of men and countless indigenous porters died in these futile searches. They drained lakes, including Lake Guatavita itself, finding some gold artifacts, but never the legendary metropolis. The legend of El Dorado is therefore a double mystery: the historical truth of the Muisca ritual, and the psychological mystery of how a single, magnificent ceremony could be transformed into a geographical fantasy that would alter the course of history and lead to so much destruction. Across the continent, in the cloud-shrouded forests where Peru meets Brazil and Bolivia, a similar legend persists, but with an intriguing twist that keeps it alive even today. This is the legend of Petiti, sometimes called the last refuge of the Inca. According to this narrative, when the Spanish conquest was at its height in the 1530s, the Incas did not simply surrender. Instead, a faction of the royal family, along with loyal soldiers and priests, fled from the advancing conquistadors, taking with them a vast fortune in gold and sacred objects from the Temple of the Sun in Cusco. They supposedly vanished into the remote, trackless valleys of the Peruvian Amazon, known as the Antisuyo region, where they established a new, hidden capital city, Petiti. Unlike the largely fictional El Dorado, the legend of Petiti has a more plausible historical foundation. We know that the Inca had outposts in the Amazon foothills, and there were indeed Incan resistors who held out for decades after the fall of their empire. This possibility has fueled modern expeditions, blending adventure with serious archaeological inquiry. In recent decades, explorers and researchers have ventured into the Madre de Dios region, guided by colonial-era maps, indigenous oral histories, and satellite imagery that sometimes reveals unusual geometric patterns under the dense canopy. Some have pointed to sites like Mesoamerica, where ruins with clear Incan architectural styles have been found, suggesting a significant presence. Others speculate about a massive, lost city complex known as the Pyramids of Pantiacala, though these claims remain highly controversial and lack conclusive evidence. The search for Paititi is a modern-day adventure that captures the spirit of the original mystery. It represents the hope that a major piece of pre-Columbian history, a final chapter of the Inca Empire, remains hidden, waiting to be discovered. It is the search for a lost world that might actually be real. The legends of El Dorado and Paititi, while both centered on gold, ultimately speak to different human desires. El Dorado was a mirage born from conquest and greed, a cautionary tale about the dangers of obsession. Paititi, however, represents a longing for a lost heritage, a hidden history that, if found, could offer a more complete understanding of a great civilization's final days. They are two sides of the same golden coin, forever gleaming just beyond the reach of the known world. From the golden mirages of legend, we now turn to a civilization that left behind stunningly real and visceral evidence of its power and beliefs. Along the arid northern coast of Peru, the Mach culture thrived from about 100 to 800 Common Era, creating a society of remarkable artists, engineers, and warriors. Their landscape is dominated by two massive structures that stand in stark contrast to one another, representing the dual nature of Mach authority: the Huaca del Sol and the Huaca de la Luna, the Pyramid of the Sun and the Pyramid of the Moon. The Huaca del Sol is a staggering feat of engineering. It is the largest adobe brick structure ever built in the ancient Americas, a colossal pyramid constructed from an estimated 140 million mud bricks. Erosion has weathered its form over the centuries, but you can still sense its original imposing scale. The bricks themselves are not anonymous, many bear distinctive marks, likely signifying the specific communities or labor groups that contributed to the construction. Building this pyramid was a massive communal project, a physical manifestation of the Mach state's ability to mobilize its entire population. It is widely believed to have served as an administrative and political center, the seat of a powerful ruling class whose authority was literally cemented into the landscape. Just a few hundred yards away, the Huaca de la Luna presents a very different face. Smaller but far more intricate, this pyramid is the Mach's spiritual heart. What makes it extraordinary are its brilliantly preserved polychrome murals, layered one on top of the other like pages in a sacred text. Every few generations, the Mach would seal the existing temple and build a new, larger one directly over it. As archaeologists carefully peel back these layers, they reveal a stunning array of murals depicting a central, fearsome deity now known as the Decapitator. This figure, often part human, part jaguar, and part spider, holds a knife in one hand and a severed head in the other. The walls are alive with repeating geometric patterns and vibrant colors: red, yellow, blue, white, and black that have survived centuries of exposure. The Huaca de la Luna was not a place of gentle worship. It was a stage for powerful and likely violent rituals central to the Mach worldview. The contrast between the two Huacas is profound. The Pyramid of the Sun represents the secular, political power of the state, a mountain of bricks built by human labor. The Pyramid of the Moon represents the spiritual power that legitimized that rule, a richly decorated temple dedicated to deities who demanded sacrifice. Together, they formed the core of a sophisticated theocratic state. For a long time, the vivid art on the Huaca de la Luna's walls, showing elaborate ceremonies and sacerdotes, was the primary window into Mach elite life. That all changed in 1987 with a discovery that would rewrite our understanding of this culture. About 20 miles away, near the modern town of Chiclayo, looters were closing in on a small, crumbling mud brick pyramid called Huaca Rajada. But archaeologist Walter Alva and his team arrived just in time, beginning an excavation that would uncover one of the most spectacular tombs ever found in the Western Hemisphere.
What they discovered was the undisturbed burial of a Mach lord, now known as the Lord of Sipan. This was not merely the grave of a wealthy man. It was the tomb of a ruler who was buried as a living god. The lord's body was found adorned with an almost unimaginable array of treasures. He wore a magnificent headdress made of gold and silver, with a huge crescent-shaped ornament and tall plumes. His face was covered with a gold mask, and his neck was heavy with necklaces of solid gold beads, each the size of a plum. His hands held scepters of gold and silver, and his body was surrounded by hundreds of finely crafted ceramic vessels. But the true mystery and significance of the tomb went beyond the sheer wealth. The Lord of Sipan was not buried alone. He was accompanied by a full retinue of sacrificial attendants, each interred in a specific position to serve him in the afterlife. In a chamber above him was a soldier, entombed with his shield. To his sides were 3 young women, likely wives or concubines. Close by were a military commander, a flag bearer, and 2 llamas, presumably to carry his belongings. And in a grimly practical touch, a man who had had his feet amputated was placed as a guard at the entrance to the tomb, perhaps to ensure he could never leave his post. This elaborate arrangement mirrored the scenes of ritual and hierarchy depicted on the murals at Huaca de la Luna with astonishing accuracy. The discovery proved that these artistic representations were not mere mythology. They were documenting a real social and religious structure. The Lord of Sipan was one of the individuals who would have presided over the ceremonies at the Huaca de la Luna. The treasures he took with him were the very regalia he wore in life, confirming his status as a figure who embodied both political and divine authority. The uncovering of the Lord of Sipan's tomb was a watershed moment in New World archaeology. It provided, for the first time, a direct, tangible link between the iconography of a pre-Columbian culture and the actual lives of its elite. It transformed the Mach from a mysterious civilization known only through its pottery and pyramids into a society with identifiable rulers, a complex belief system, and elaborate funeral practices. The artifacts, now housed in the Royal Tombs of Sipan Museum, are of such exquisite craftsmanship that they rival the treasures of any ancient Old World civilization. The discovery also highlighted a poignant reality. The tomb was found buried within a modest-looking mud brick platform, a structure that looters had initially dismissed as insignificant. This suggests that other, equally rich tombs may have been destroyed without ever being documented. The Lord of Sipan's burial is a powerful reminder of how much we have yet to learn, and how a single, chance discovery can illuminate an entire civilization, pulling a king and his court from the shadows of 1,000 years and placing them firmly back into the light of history. While the Mach left behind spectacular tombs that speak clearly of their power, other civilizations of ancient Mexico have proven far more elusive, their histories shrouded in layers of myth and political propaganda. This brings us to one of the most intriguing debates in Mesoamerican archaeology, the mystery of the Toltecs. For the mighty Aztecs, who dominated central Mexico centuries later, the Toltecs were not just a historical people. They were the epitome of civilization itself, a golden age of giants and master craftsmen. The Aztec emperors proudly traced their own lineage back to Toltec royalty, claiming a direct inheritance of their legitimacy and wisdom. In their accounts, the Toltec capital, Tolan, which we know today as the archaeological site of Chulay in the state of Hidalgo, was a place of unimaginable splendor. Its buildings were said to be adorned with gold, jade, and quetzal feathers, and its people were unparalleled artists, astronomers, and architects. According to these legends, it was the Toltecs, under their legendary priest King Tapiltzin-Quetzalcoatl, who invented all the arts of civilization, from writing and calendar keeping to the practice of working precious metals. But did this glorious empire ever truly exist as the Aztecs described it? This is the core of the Toltec mystery. When archaeologists began excavating Chulay in the mid-20th century, they found a significant city, to be sure, but one that seemed to fall short of the mythical Tolan. The ruins date to the early post-classic period, between 900 and 1150 Common Era. They include impressive structures, most notably a large pyramid platform topped with massive, 15-foot-tall stone columns carved in the shape of warriors, armed with atlatls, or spear throwers, and wearing butterfly-shaped pectorals. There are also ball courts and a palace complex. The problem is one of scale and splendor. Chile is a respectable regional capital, but it lacks the sheer grandeur and wealth of earlier cities like Teotihuacan or even contemporary Chichen Itza in the Maya world, with which it shares some striking architectural similarities. There is little evidence of the extravagant jade and gold that the Aztec stories described. So, were the Aztecs simply exaggerating? Did they inflate the achievements of a more modest culture to legitimize their own rule? Or is Chile not the true Tolan at all? Some scholars have proposed that the legendary Tolan might actually refer to the much larger and older city of Teotihuacan, whose ruins the Aztecs also revered, and which would better fit the description of a monumental, culturally dominant capital. The most likely resolution to this mystery lies in understanding that the Aztecs were not writing objective history. Their chronicles were a blend of fact, myth, and political ideology. The Toltecs of legend probably represent a composite ideal, a symbolic, ancestor, civilization crafted from memories of several different powerful states that preceded the Aztecs, including both Chile and Teotihuacan. The historical Toltecs of Chile were indeed an influential culture whose artistic styles and religious ideas spread widely across Mesoamerica, but the Aztecs magnified their importance, transforming them into a paradigm of perfect rule. The mystery, therefore, is not solely about uncovering a lost city, but about deciphering how a civilization constructs its own past to serve the needs of the present. The Toltecs stand as a powerful reminder that history is often written by the victors, and sometimes the most enduring legacy is not what you actually were, but what those who came after needed you to be. While the Aztecs looked to the Toltecs as a model, they faced a formidable and mysterious rival in their own time, a kingdom that successfully resisted their imperial expansion for decades. To the west, in the mountainous highlands of what is now the state of Michoacán, flourished the Tarascan Empire, known to its own people as the Purépecha. This was one of the few major Mesoamerican civilizations that the Aztecs could never conquer, despite repeated attempts. The Tarascans were a military powerhouse, and their success was built on a unique technological advantage. They were the undisputed masters of metallurgy in ancient Mexico. While most Mesoamerican cultures were in a Stone Age, working with obsidian and flint, the Tarascans were crafting tools and weapons from copper, bronze, silver, and gold. They produced efficient copper axes, sharp bronze knives, and fearsome copper spear points that likely gave them a significant edge in combat against Aztec warriors, armed primarily with obsidian-edged weapons. Their artisans created exquisite jewelry, including intricate ear spools and necklaces, using advanced techniques like lost wax casting and soldering. The origin of this advanced metalworking knowledge is a profound mystery. The technology appears rather suddenly in the archaeological record around the 13th century Common Era. There is little evidence of a gradual, local development of metalworking in the region. This has led to the compelling theory that the knowledge was introduced from further south, likely through maritime contacts with traders from Ecuador or Peru, where metalworking had a very long and sophisticated history. The Purépecha heartland is not far from the Pacific coast, making such contact a distinct possibility. Imagine a lone seafaring raft from South America making landfall, its crew carrying not just goods, but the transformative knowledge of smelting and alloying metals. This technological transfer would have revolutionized Tarascan society, propelling them to a position of regional dominance. Their capital city, Tizintzuntzin, on the shores of Lake Pátzcuaro, was an impressive urban center, known for its unique yacatas large, keyhole-shaped pyramids built from stone and packed earth that served as the basis for temples. From here, the Tarascan rulers, known as the Kazansai, governed a centralized state that rivaled the Aztec Empire in its organization and power. The mystery of the Tarascans is not a question of their existence, which is well documented, but the source of the specialized knowledge that allowed them to become the only Bronze Age culture in Mesoamerica, creating a formidable kingdom that remains a fascinating and often overlooked chapter in the ancient story of the Americas. While the Tarascans demonstrate the clear and transformative power of real technological knowledge, our next mysteries plunge us into the realm of the bizarre and the controversial, where the line between misinterpretation and outright deception becomes dangerously blurred. These are the cases of artifacts that, if taken at face value, would completely upend our understanding of history, suggesting impossible encounters between ancient cultures and creatures or technology from another time. We begin in Colombia, with a collection of small, intricate gold objects that have ignited a firestorm of speculation, crafted by the Quimbe culture, which flourished between the 4th and 7th centuries Common Era. These artifacts were part of a magnificent treasure trove discovered in the late 19th century. Most of the pieces are beautiful, stylized representations of animals, insects, birds, lizards, and fish, showcasing the Quimbe's exceptional skill in lost wax casting. But a handful of these objects, often called the Quimbe airplanes, look strikingly different, with their delta wing shapes, upright tail fins, and what appear to be cockpits. They bear an uncanny resemblance to modern jet aircraft. This startling similarity was first highlighted in the 1970s, and for proponents of ancient astronaut theories or lost advanced civilizations, the Quimbe airplanes are presented as smoking gun evidence. The argument is straightforward. How could a pre-Columbian culture, with no knowledge of aerodynamics, create such precise models of flying machines unless they had seen them? Some have even gone so far as to create scaled-up, aerodynamic models of these artifacts and demonstrated that they can, in fact, fly when propelled through the air. This seems, on the surface, to be a compelling case. However, mainstream archaeology and zoology offer a much more grounded, and indeed more likely, explanation. When you place these controversial objects side by side with the rest of the Quimbe abeshiri, a clear pattern emerges. The features interpreted as wings and tail fins align perfectly with the stylized anatomical features of the local fauna. The delta wing shape is a common artistic representation for a fish or a ray, with the cockpit being the head and the tail fin representing the tail. Other objects look unmistakably like birds in flight, with swept-back wings. The Quimbe artisans were masters of abstraction, capturing the essence of an animal's form in elegant, minimalist gold. What we are seeing is not a fleet of ancient jets, but a sophisticated artistic tradition that stylized nature in a way that happens, purely by coincidence, to mirror the design principles of modern aircraft. It is a fascinating example of pareidolia, the human tendency to see familiar patterns, like airplanes, in random or natural shapes. The mystery of the Quimbe artifacts is not about ancient technology, but about how our own modern perspectives can profoundly reshape our interpretation of the past. If the Quimbe airplanes represent a case of mistaken identity, the next controversial artifacts represent one of the most famous and elaborate hoaxes in archaeological history. From the desert region near Ica, Peru, emerged a collection of stones that would become a global sensation. Known as the Ica stones, these are andesite rocks that have been carved with intricate scenes that defy conventional history. The carvings, etched into the dark surface, depict a bewildering array of subjects: humans using telescopes, performing complex medical surgeries like heart transplants, and most sensationally, living alongside and even riding dinosaurs such as Triceratops and Stegosaurus. The stones were first brought to widespread attention in the 1960s by a local farmer, who claimed to have found them in a cave. They were enthusiastically promoted by a Peruvian physician, Dr. Javier Cabrera Darquia, who amassed a collection of over 15,000 stones and argued they were a library left by an ancient, advanced civilization that coexisted with dinosaurs. The implications were staggering. If authentic, the Ica stones would invalidate everything we know about human evolution, paleontology, and the timeline of life on Earth. They became a cornerstone for creationist and pseudo-archaeological theories, presented as proof that mainstream science is wrong. However, the mystery began to unravel under scrutiny. Geologists who examined the stones noted that the carved grooves showed signs of being made with modern tools, lacking the weathering that would be expected on ancient artifacts. More damningly, the story of their discovery was inconsistent. Eventually, the farmer who had supplied the stones to Dr. Cabrera, Basilio Ashuya, confessed in a 1974 interview. He admitted that he and other local farmers were the artists. They carved the stones using dental drills and small chisels, then aged them by baking them in donkey dung to give them an ancient patina. The subjects were not inspired by ancient knowledge, but from popular culture, comic books, magazines, and textbooks featuring dinosaurs and scientific illustrations. Oshuya stated that he created the stones because there was a booming market for them among tourists and collectors, and it was a lucrative way to make a living. Despite this confession, which has been repeated by other carvers, the legend of the Ica stones persists. Dr. Cabrera and his supporters argued that the confession was coerced to avoid prosecution for selling archaeological artifacts, and they continued to claim the stones were genuine. This highlights a powerful psychological phenomenon. When a narrative is deeply appealing, contradictory evidence is often dismissed as part of a cover-up. The Ica stones tap into a deep-seated desire for a secret history, one where humans were once more advanced or lived in a more wondrous world. The real mystery of the Ica stones, therefore, is not about their origin, which is clearly a modern hoax, but about why the myth remains so resilient. It demonstrates the enduring conflict between empirical evidence and compelling storytelling, and how the allure of a mystery can sometimes be more powerful than the truth that solves it. Together, the Quimbaya airplanes and the Ica stones serve as important cautionary tales in the study of the ancient past, reminding us to balance open-minded curiosity with rigorous skepticism. But if the mysteries of Peru and Mexico often involve dramatic tales of conquest and gold, the high deserts of the American Southwest hold a puzzle of a different kind, one marked by a profound and haunting silence. Here, the ancestral Pueblones, a people once known by the Navajo term Anasazi, or ancient enemies, created a remarkable culture centered on the breathtaking canyonlands of the Colorado Plateau. Their greatest achievement was the complex of monumental, great houses in Chaco-Canyon, a place that, between the 9th and 12th centuries, became the unquestioned cultural and ceremonial heart of their world. Chaco is not a city in the traditional sense, but something more mysterious and spiritually potent. At its center stands Pueblo Bonito, a massive, D-shaped structure rising 4 or 5 stories high, containing over 600 rooms and 37 kivas, the circular, subterranean chambers used for religious ceremonies. The scale is staggering. The entire complex was meticulously planned and constructed over centuries, using millions of individually shaped sandstone blocks, and hold wooden beams from forests dozens of miles away. What makes Chaco Canyon truly enigmatic is the evidence of its sophisticated understanding of astronomy and engineering. The buildings were precisely aligned with the cycles of the sun and moon. A sliver of light dagger, a blade of sunlight, pierces through a carefully placed window to strike a spiral petroglyph on a distant rock face only on the summer solstice. Roads, 30 feet wide and impeccably straight, radiate out from the canyon for miles, connecting it to over 150 outlying communities across an area the size of Ireland. These were not mere footpaths, they were engineered thoroughfares, cut through bedrock and bordered by low stone curbs, suggesting a level of centralized coordination that is surprising for a society without a written language or a known ruling class. Chaco was clearly a pilgrimage center, a place where people gathered for grand ceremonies, to trade goods like turquoise, macaw feathers from Mesoamerica, and shell from the Pacific coast. It was the spiritual anchor of a vast region, a place that orchestrated the cosmic and social order for thousands of people. Then, by the middle of the 12th century, the canyon was abandoned. This was not a sudden, panicked flight, but a gradual, deliberate migration away from this monumental center over a generation or two. The great houses stood empty, their rooms filling with sand, their silence broken only by the wind. This disappearance is one of the great enduring mysteries of North American archaeology. Why would a people leave behind such an immense investment of labor and belief? The most compelling theory points directly to the environment, tree ring data, which provides an incredibly precise record of past climate, reveals that a catastrophic 50-year megadrought gripped the region beginning around 1130. For an agricultural society living on the knife's edge of survival in an arid land, this was a death sentence. The maize, beans, and squash that sustained them would have failed, year after year. The water table would have dropped, and the delicate balance of life in the canyon would have been shattered. In the face of such a prolonged environmental crisis, the power of the ceremonies at Chaco may have simply faded. If the rituals could no longer bring rain, then the authority of the leaders who performed them would have evaporated. But climate change alone may not tell the whole story. There is also evidence of increasing social unrest in the archaeological record. In the final decades of occupation, some great houses show signs of being fortified. Doors and windows were sealed up, perhaps for defense. There is even evidence of violence at some sites, including traumatized bones and possible cannibalism, though this interpretation remains highly debated. It is possible that the social fabric, strained by the failing environment, began to tear. The highly centralized system that built Chaco may have collapsed under the pressure, leading to conflict between communities competing for scarce resources. The people did not vanish from the earth. They migrated to new areas with more reliable water sources, like the cliff dwellings of Mesa Verde or the settlements along the Rio Grande, where their descendants, the Hopi, Zuni, and other Pueblo peoples, live today. The mystery of Chaco is not one of extinction, but of transformation. It forces us to consider the fragility of even the most sophisticated societies when confronted with environmental change and social stress. The empty great houses of Chaco Canyon stand as a majestic but sobering monument to human adaptation, a reminder that a change in the wind or the failure of the rains can alter the course of history, leaving behind stone puzzles for us to ponder under the vast southwestern sky. From the stark, sun-baked silence of Chaco Canyon, we now journey to an entirely different world, a landscape of lush, mist-shrouded mountains where a civilization carved its cities into the very slopes of the jungle. High in the Sierra Nevada de Santa Marta of northern Colombia, a unique and isolated mountain range that rises abruptly from the Caribbean coast, the Torona civilization flourished from around 200 Common Era until the Spanish conquest in the 16th century. The Torona were masters of their challenging environment, unparalleled goldsmiths and ingenious engineers who defied the steep, rugged terrain to create a network of sophisticated settlements connected by stone-paved paths and elaborate aqueduct systems. Unlike the desert cultures we have explored, the Torona thrived in a world of abundant rain and dense tropical forest, and their adaptations to this environment are a central part of their mystery. For centuries, the Torona's greatest achievements remained hidden, swallowed by the relentless advance of the jungle. Then, in the 1970s, a remarkable discovery brought them back into the light. Treasure hunters, known locally as guaqueros, pursuing rumors of a lost city, stumbled upon a series of moss-covered stone terraces ascending a remote mountainside. Word of this find reached archaeologists, leading to the official rediscovery in 1976 of what is now called Ciudad Perdida, the Lost City. Reaching it is a challenge even today, requiring a multi-day trek through dense, steep rainforest, crossing rushing rivers, and navigating slippery paths. This inaccessibility is precisely what preserved it. The city is a breathtaking complex of over 200 terraces carved into the mountainside, connected by a network of cobbled stairs and paths. These terraces served as the foundations for temples, residences, and plazas, creating a vast urban center that was home to perhaps 2,000 to 3,000 people at its peak between the 11th and 14th centuries. The layout is not random. It reflects a deep understanding of urban planning and social organization, with different areas likely designated for elites, artisans, and commoners, all integrated into the natural contours of the land. The engineering prowess of the Torona is staggering. They constructed sophisticated stone-lined canals and aqueducts that channeled fresh water from mountain streams throughout the city, providing a reliable supply for drinking, bathing, and likely for agricultural terraces where they grew maize, beans, and other crops. Their stonework, using locally sourced rocks, is precise and durable, built to withstand the torrential rains and seismic activity of the region. But the Torona are perhaps even more famous for their extraordinary metallurgy. They were among the finest goldsmiths of the ancient Americas, creating objects of stunning complexity and beauty using the lost wax casting technique. Their artifacts are not merely decorative, they are imbued with profound spiritual meaning. They crafted intricate pendants, nose rings, and ear ornaments depicting shamans transformed into bats, jaguars, and other powerful animals, reflecting a cosmology where the human, animal, and spirit worlds were intimately connected. The famous tunjos, small votive figures, often show individuals in dynamic poses, possibly representing ancestors or deities. This mastery of gold was so renowned that it undoubtedly fueled the Spanish obsession with finding El Dorado, a legend that may have its roots in Tirona rituals. The great mystery of the Tirona, however, is not just how they built Ciudad Perdida, but why they ultimately abandoned it and the nature of their society. When Spanish conquistadors arrived in the early 16th century, they encountered fierce resistance from the Tirona. For decades, the Tirona held the invaders at bay from their mountain strongholds. But European diseases, against which they had no immunity, and the relentless pressure of colonization eventually took their toll. By the end of the 16th century, Ciudad Perdida and other major centers were largely deserted, their populations decimated or displaced. The descendants of the Tirona, the Kogi, Arhuaco, Wiwa, and Cancumo peoples, continue to live in the Sierra Nevada today, regarding themselves as the elder brothers of humanity, guardians of the sacred mountain they see as the heart of the world. They maintain traditional knowledge and a deep spiritual connection to the land, including the ruins of Ciudad Perdida, which they consider a sacred ancestral site. This living connection adds a profound layer to the mystery. For archaeologists, the questions are manifold. What was the political structure that enabled the construction of such a complex city? Was it a centralized chiefdom or a confederation of smaller, allied communities? The exact nature of their social hierarchy remains unclear. Furthermore, the full extent of their territory is still not known. New terraces and pathways are continually being discovered under the jungle canopy, suggesting that Ciudad Perdida was just one node in a much larger and more interconnected network of settlements. The ongoing archaeological work is a delicate balance, piecing together the past while respecting the beliefs of the indigenous communities for whom these sites are not relics, but a living part of their spiritual heritage. The enigma of the Tirona is therefore a dual one. It is a puzzle of stones and gold waiting to be fully unearthed, and a living cultural mystery, a testament to a people who mastered a dramatic landscape and whose legacy continues to echo through the mountains they once called home. Yet while the Tirona mastered their vertical world of mountain and mist, other ancient civilizations were grappling with a challenge of a different dimension altogether: the monumental task of capturing human thought itself. Long before the rise of the Aztecs or even the Maya, in the rugged highlands of Oaxaca, Mexico, the Zapotec civilization was pioneering one of the most profound inventions in human history: writing. At the magnificent site of Monte Alban, a city built on a flattened mountain ridge overlooking the surrounding valleys, the Zapotecs created one of the very first writing systems in the Americas, emerging as early as 600 before Common Era. Walking among the granite ruins, you encounter hundreds of stone slabs, or stelae, covered in intricate carvings. These are not just abstract patterns. They are a sophisticated script, a combination of logograms that represent whole words and syllabic signs that represent sounds. This is the Zapotec hieroglyphic script, and while we can grasp its general purpose, the vast majority of its messages remain locked in stone, a silent conversation we are only beginning to overhear. The challenge of deciphering the Zapotec script is immense, a puzzle complicated by time and a lack of a linguistic key. Unlike the Maya script, which was painstakingly decoded over decades using bilingual references and the knowledge of living Mayan languages, Zapotec presents a much tougher problem. Today, several modern Zapotec languages are still spoken in Oaxaca, providing a crucial link to the past. However, the language has changed significantly over 2,500 years, creating a vast gulf between the ancient inscriptions and their modern counterparts. The script itself is highly condensed and abstract. A single glyph block might pack multiple elements together, and without a large body of text to compare like the extensive royal histories the Maya left behind, it's incredibly difficult to identify patterns and establish a reliable vocabulary. So far, scholars have had the most success with the most straightforward inscriptions. We can recognize glyphs for calendar dates, identifying the day signs and numbers from the 260-day ritual calendar that was central to Mesoamerican life. We can also identify the names of places, like the glyph for Monte Alban itself, which often appears as a stylized hill with a building on top. And in some cases, we can pick out the names of rulers, often accompanied by glyphs signifying capture or conquest, suggesting these monuments were erected to commemorate military victories and legitimize political power. But this is just scratching the surface. The deeper, more complex texts, the stories of dynasties, the details of rituals, the myths of creation remain stubbornly out of reach. Each deciphered glyph is a hard-won victory, but it also highlights how much we are missing. The Zapotec script is a testament to a brilliant, independent intellectual tradition, a system of writing that developed entirely separately from those in the Old World. Its continued obscurity means that a major chapter in the story of early Mesoamerican civilization is still waiting to be read. It represents a fundamental mystery. The thoughts and voices of the people who built one of America's first great cities are right there in front of us, carved with perfect clarity, yet their meaning floats just beyond our understanding. If the Zapotec script is a difficult puzzle, then the writing system of the Epi-Olmec culture is a riddle wrapped in an enigma, hidden within an even deeper obscurity. Following the decline of the great Olmec heartland centers around 400 before Common Era, their cultural influence did not simply vanish. Instead, it evolved and persisted among what scholars call the Epi-Olmec, or post-Olmec, peoples who lived along the Gulf Coast of Mexico in the states of Veracruz and Tabasco. This culture is best known for the magnificent artifacts found at sites like La Majara and the Tres Zapotes monument, and it is on these objects that we find the Isthmian script. The name comes from the Isthmus of Tehuantepec, the region where it was used, and it appears to be a direct descendant of the earlier Olmec writing system, fragments of which appear on a handful of artifacts like the Cascajal block. The Isthmian script is even more elusive than the Zapotec. To date, we have only a handful of inscriptions, and the longest of them, on the La Majara stela, is the key to the entire mystery. The La Majara stela is a towering 6.5-foot tall stone column, covered on two sides with over 500 finely carved glyphs. It also features a detailed portrait of a ruler, standing in an elaborate costume. This should be a decoder ring, a Rosetta Stone for the Isthmian script, but the limited number of texts makes the task of decipherment incredibly difficult. Without a large corpus of writing, linguists struggle to find the repeating patterns and contextual clues necessary to crack the code. In the 1990s, two linguists, John Justesen and Terence Kaufman, proposed a bold decipherment. They argued that the language represented was a pre-Proto-Zoquian language, related to languages still spoken in the region today. Using this assumption, they claim to have identified specific glyphs for verbs, nouns, and even a historical narrative on the La Majara stela, describing the rise and reign of a leader named Harvester Mountain Lord, complete with dates from the long count calendar and descriptions of rituals and conquests. However, this decipherment has not been widely accepted by the academic community. Other prominent Mayan epigraphers, like Stephen Houston and Michael Coe, have criticized the methodology, pointing out inconsistencies and a lack of conclusive verification. The debate highlights the delicate and often contentious nature of decipherment. It is a science that requires a blend of rigorous linguistic analysis and a degree of intuitive leaps, and without a bilingual text or a much larger body of inscriptions to test hypotheses against, the Isthmian script remains in a state of limbo. Is the Justesen and Kaufman decipherment a brilliant breakthrough, or an elaborate but flawed hypothesis? The current consensus leans toward the latter, meaning the script is still largely considered undeciphered. The Epi-Olmec people, who stood at a critical juncture between the Olmec mother culture and the later civilizations like the Maya, undoubtedly had important stories to tell. Their script is a bridge between two worlds, but for now, it is a bridge we cannot cross. The silent glyphs on the La Majara stela represent a profound loss, a missing link in the history of Mesoamerican writing, whose secrets continue to resist the best efforts of modern scholarship. Far to the east of the monumental struggles of the Aztecs and the silent cities of the Maya, another, quieter tradition of earth moving was unfolding across the river valleys and woodlands of North America. For thousands of years, from around 3500 before Common Era until the arrival of Europeans, a succession of cultures, now collectively known as the Mound Builders, shaped the landscape on a scale that is only now being fully appreciated. The story begins with the ancient Adena culture, emerging in the Ohio River Valley around 1000 before Common Era. They were the pioneers, constructing conical burial mounds that rose like gentle hills over the graves of their important leaders, who were often buried with finely crafted artifacts of copper, mica, and stone. Following them, the Hopewell tradition, from about 200 before Common Era to 500 Common Era, elevated this practice to a new level of sophistication and reach. The Hopewell were not a single tribe, but a vast interaction sphere, a network of communities connected by trade routes that stretched from the Rocky Mountains to the Atlantic Ocean and from the Great Lakes to the Gulf of Mexico. Their earthworks are geometric marvels. They constructed enormous enclosures, shaping the earth into perfect circles, massive squares, and octagons, often connected by parallel earthen walls that stretched for miles. The Newark earthworks in Ohio, for instance, encompass an area so large that the entire village of Newark was built within its bounds. These were not random piles of dirt. They were precise, ceremonial landscapes that required generations of coordinated labor and a deep understanding of geometry. The Hopewell were master artisans, creating exquisite objects from materials gathered from across the continent, obsidian from Wyoming, copper from the Great Lakes, shark teeth and shells from the Gulf of Mexico, and mica from the Appalachians. These treasures were not hoarded as wealth, but were likely buried with the dead or used in elaborate ceremonies within their geometric earthworks, suggesting a society focused on ritual, cosmology, and far-flung social connections rather than centralized, militaristic power. When early European settlers first encountered these thousands of mounds, they found it impossible to believe that the Native American peoples they were displacing could have been the architects of such grand works. This gave rise to a persistent and erroneous myth of a lost race of mound builders, perhaps a band of Welsh princes, Vikings, or even one of the lost tribes of Israel, who had been wiped out by the ancestors of contemporary Native Americans. This myth, born from racism and a refusal to acknowledge the sophisticated achievements of indigenous cultures, was thoroughly debunked by the late 19th century through rigorous archaeological investigation. The evidence is now overwhelming and clear. The mound builders were the direct ancestors of many later Native American nations, including the Creek, Choctaw, Cherokee, and many others. The mystery is not who built them, but understanding the full purpose and meaning behind these immense creations. Among all these earthworks, one stands out for its unique and breathtaking form, the Great Serpent Mound in Adams County, Ohio. Stretching for a quarter of a mile along a high plateau, this effigy mound is the largest serpentine earthwork in the world. It is a sinuous, undulating form of piled earth, its body winding in 7 great curves before culminating in a tightly coiled tail and an open-mouthed head that seems to be swallowing an oval-shaped object. The sheer scale of the serpent is impossible to grasp from the ground. Its full, majestic form is only visible from the air, a fact that adds to its profound mystery. For over a century, the central question has been, which culture created this monumental serpent, and why? The traditional attribution placed its construction with the Adena culture, around 300 before Common Era. This was based on early archaeological finds in the area. However, in the 1990s, new radiocarbon dating of charcoal samples from the mound pointed to a much later date, around 1070 Common Era. This would place its creation squarely within the late woodland period, possibly by the Fort Ancient culture, a people who were contemporaries of the great Mississippian civilization to the west. The debate remains active, with some archaeologists arguing for the earlier Adena date and others supporting the later one. This is not just an academic quibble. The date fundamentally changes how we interpret the serpent's meaning. An Adena construction would connect it to their burial and earth-moving traditions, while a Fort Ancient origin would tie it to a different cosmological system, possibly influenced by the Mississippian world, with its strong emphasis on serpent symbolism, often associated with the underworld and fertility. Regardless of its builders, the most compelling theory about the Great Serpent Mound involves its potential function as a giant astronomical calendar. The serpent's head is aligned almost perfectly with the setting sun on the summer solstice, the longest day of the year. Furthermore, the curves of its body may align with the rising and setting points of the sun at the solstices and equinoxes. Some researchers have even proposed a connection to rare celestial events. In the year 1066 Common Era, a brilliant supernova, now known as the Crab Nebula, appeared in the sky, visible even during the day for nearly a month. Could the oval object in the serpent's mouth represent this new star? The timing would align with the later construction date and suggests a people deeply attuned to the heavens, recording a momentous cosmic event in earth and grass. Whether it was an Edina ancestor effigy, a fort ancient celestial marker, or a symbol of a powerful underworld spirit, the Great Serpent Mound endures as a powerful enigma. It is a testament to the spiritual and intellectual life of the ancient eastern woodlands, a colossal symbol etched into the land that continues to hold its secrets close, slumbering silently under the Ohio sun. But long before the Aztecs gave it that reverent name, Teotihuacan was a living, breathing metropolis, and at its peak around 450 Common Era, it was one of the largest cities on the entire planet, with a population that may have reached 200,000 souls. What makes this city so astonishing and so different from other ancient centers of power is not just its sheer size, but its revolutionary approach to urban living. While Rome had its insulae and medieval cities had their crowded tenements, Teotihuacan developed a unique and surprisingly egalitarian solution for housing its massive population: the sprawling apartment compound. These were not the hovels of the poor, but substantial, well-built complexes that formed the very fabric of the city. Archaeologists have uncovered over 2,000 of these compounds, each one a walled neighborhood enclosing dozens of individual apartments arranged around central courtyards. Built from stone and adobe, and often covered in vibrant plaster, these were multi-family dwellings that provided not just shelter, but a sense of community. Each compound likely housed an extended family or a group of people practicing the same craft: obsidian knappers, potters, shell ornament makers, or merchants. The courtyards served as shared spaces for cooking, socializing, and even small-scale ritual activities, with drainage systems and designated areas for preparing food. This was a level of urban planning and provision of standardized housing that was unparalleled in the ancient world. It suggests a highly organized society, one that managed to create a remarkably stable and cohesive urban environment for centuries, avoiding the slums and extreme social disorder that often plagued other ancient cities. Walking through the ruins of these compounds today, you get a sense of the daily life of the common people, a rare glimpse into an ancient world where the quality of life for the many seems to have been a genuine priority. This carefully planned urban landscape was centered around the city's awe-inspiring ceremonial axis, the Avenue of the Dead, which runs for over a mile and is flanked by the massive Pyramid of the Sun and the slightly smaller but more ornate Pyramid of the Moon. The entire city was laid out on a precise grid, aligned 15.5 degrees east of north, an orientation that may have held significant astronomical meaning. Yet for all this evidence of sophisticated social organization, Teotihuacan presents us with its most profound and enduring mystery: the identity of its founders and rulers. In almost every other contemporary civilization, from the Maya to the Zapotecs, we find clear evidence of a powerful ruling class. We have their names carved in stone, their grandiose tombs filled with treasure, their palaces adorned with images celebrating their military victories and divine right to rule. At Teotihuacan, this evidence is conspicuously, bafflingly absent. There are no grand royal palaces that clearly stand above the apartment compounds. There are no stone stelae covered in hieroglyphs boasting of a king's achievements. Most strikingly, despite decades of excavation, archaeologists have never found a single, unequivocal royal tomb. This is a silence that echoes across the centuries. Who governed this vast, orderly city? Was it a single, powerful dynasty that somehow managed to keep their identities a secret? Or was Teotihuacan something far more unique in the ancient world, a state run not by a king, but by a collective, perhaps a council of powerful merchant guilds or high priests who govern collaboratively, consciously avoiding the cult of personality that defined their neighbors. The mystery only deepens when we consider the city's origins and its ultimate fate. Teotihuacan did not grow slowly from a village. It appears to have been a deliberate, large-scale urban project from the start, founded around 100 before Common Era. Who had the vision and the authority to plan a city of this magnitude? The ethnic and linguistic identity of its original inhabitants is completely unknown. They left no deciphered written records. Then, around the year 550 Common Era, after 6 centuries of flourishing, the city experienced a dramatic collapse. The evidence points not to an invasion, but to a violent internal uprising. In the city's core, along the Avenue of the Dead, statues of the city's deities were systematically mutilated and pulled down. Major buildings, including temples and perhaps the seats of government, were burned in a great conflagration. This pattern suggests a popular revolt, an uprising of the masses against the ruling elite. But if that is the case, who were they revolting against? The very rulers who have left no physical trace of themselves. It is as if the city's leadership was so effectively expunged from history that even the method of their overthrow erases them further. The people of Teotihuacan did not vanish. The city's population gradually declined over a century or more, likely dispersing into smaller communities around the Valley of Mexico. But the political and cultural engine that drove the city simply shut down. The enigma of Teotihuacan is therefore a double one, a mystery of a power structure that was seemingly invisible in life, and a revolution that destroyed a ruling class we still cannot identify. It stands as a powerful alternative model of what ancient civilization could be. A society that built one of the world's greatest cities, not for the glory of a king, but perhaps for the collective good of its people, leaving behind a legacy of stone and silence that challenges our most basic assumptions about power in the ancient world. And yet, for all the grandeur of planned cities and sprawling empires, some of the most profound mysteries of the ancient Americas are found not in stone monuments, but in the silent, preserved remains of the people themselves. Our next journey takes us to the stark, arid coast of the Atacama Desert in northern Chile and southern Peru. A landscape so dry, it is one of the most lifeless places on Earth. It is here, in this harsh environment, that a simple fishing culture known as the Chinchorro performed a breathtaking act of reverence that would echo for millennia. Beginning around 5000 before Common Era and continuing for nearly 3,000 years, the Chinchorro began to practice a form of mummification that predates the more famous Egyptian traditions by a staggering 2,000 years. This was not a practice reserved for a privileged elite, as it would be in Egypt. The Chinchorro mummified their dead indiscriminately, men, women, and children of all ages, including the most fragile, premature babies. This democratic approach to eternity reveals a society with a complex and deeply spiritual relationship with death and the afterlife, one that saw every member of the community as worthy of this elaborate transformation. The process itself was an intricate and astonishing feat. The Chinchorro did not simply rely on the natural desiccation provided by the dry desert air. They actively created artificial mummies. The standard method, known as the black mummy technique, involved a complete disassembly and reconstruction of the body. The skin was carefully removed, and the internal organs and muscles were taken out. The skeleton was then reinforced with sticks to provide structural support, and the body cavity was stuffed with natural fibers and clay. The skin was often replaced or supplemented with sea lion skin, and the entire body was meticulously reassembled. The final and perhaps most haunting step was the creation of a mask. A clay paste was applied to the face, often featuring a simple mouth and eyes, and the entire body was then painted with a black manganese paste, or in a later period, a red ochre pigment. The result was not a hidden corpse, but a visible, sculpted effigy of the deceased, a permanent, tangible presence kept within the community. The purpose of this intense, weeks-long ritual remains a matter of speculation. It may have been a way to manage grief, to keep the physical presence of loved ones nearby, or it may reflect a belief in an active afterlife, where the preserved body was necessary for the soul's continued journey. The Chinchorro mummies are a powerful, intimate mystery. They speak not of kings and power, but of a universal human desire to conquer mortality, a sentiment etched into the very flesh and bone of a people who found a way to make their dead live on forever. From the intentional, culturally significant shaping of the dead on the Chilean coast, we travel a few hundred miles north to the Paracas Peninsula of Peru, where another set of modified human remains has sparked a very different and far more controversial kind of mystery. Here, the Paracas culture, which flourished from around 800 to 100 before Common Era, practiced a form of burial that has left behind a collection of human skulls that are unlike any others in the world. These are the famous paracas-skulls, notable for their extreme elongation, while cranial deformation, the intentional shaping of an infant's soft skull by binding it between boards or with cloth, was a common practice among many ancient cultures worldwide, including some in the Americas. The paracas skulls are in a category of their own. The degree of elongation is far more pronounced, and crucially, some researchers claim there are significant anatomical differences that cannot be explained by simple binding alone. The mainstream archaeological explanation is that the paracas skulls are indeed the result of intentional cultural modification. For the Paracas people, who were accomplished weavers and known for their elaborate textiles, an elongated head was likely a mark of status, beauty, and a connection to the divine. By applying constant pressure to an infant's skull over a period of years, the soft, pliable bones would gradually deform into the desired shape, creating a permanent physical marker of elite identity. This practice is well documented across cultures and is a perfectly plausible explanation for the general appearance of the skulls. However, a closer examination by a small group of researchers, led by the late Peruvian archaeologist Julio Tello, who first discovered the skulls in the 1920s, and more recently by enthusiasts like author Brian Forster, has proposed a more radical theory. They point to several anomalous features. First, they note that the cranial volume of some paracas skulls is significantly larger, by up to 25%, than that of a conventional human skull. Second, they argue that the position of the foramen magnum, the hole at the base of the skull where the spinal cord connects, is located further forward than in a normal human. These two traits, they argue, would be impossible to achieve through external pressure alone, which can change the shape of the skull, but cannot increase its overall volume or alter the fundamental placement of its anatomical structures. This has led to the sensational claim that the paracas skulls represent a distinct, unknown human species, or even evidence of extraterrestrial ancestry. Proponents of this view suggest that the elongation is a natural genetic trait of a separate branch of hominids, or that the paracas people were attempting to mimic the appearance of star beings who visited them in the distant past. It is a theory that captures the popular imagination, but is met with extreme skepticism from the scientific community. Mainstream anthropologists counter that the claims of increased cranial volume and a shifted foramen magnum are based on flawed measurements and a misunderstanding of normal human variation, especially when examining a limited sample size. They argue that the powerful binding techniques used by the paracas, applied from birth, could indeed account for the dramatic shape and even create the illusion of greater volume by stretching the skull upwards and backwards. Furthermore, preliminary DNA testing conducted on a few of the skulls, though controversial and not yet published in a peer-reviewed scientific journal, has been said to show mitochondrial DNA with mutations unknown in any human, primate, or animal, a claim that, if verified, would be revolutionary. However, until such evidence is subjected to rigorous, independent scientific scrutiny, the vast majority of experts maintain that the paracas skulls are a fascinating, but entirely human, example of cultural body modification. The enduring fascination with the paracas skulls, much like the crystal skulls, reveals as much about our own time as it does about the ancient past. They stand at the intersection of rigorous science and boundless speculation. Are they proof of a lost chapter in human history, or are they a testament to the incredible lengths to which human cultures will go to define their identity and their connection to the cosmos? The mystery of the paracas-skulls forces us to confront our own biases and our desire for the world to be stranger and more wonderful than it might appear. Whether the product of cultural ritual or a more enigmatic origin, these elongated skulls remain a powerful symbol of the enduring human drive to reshape ourselves, both physically and spiritually, in our eternal search for meaning. Yet if the silent, sculpted faces of the paracas-skulls represent a mystery of human form, our final journey reveals a mystery written across the very landscape on a scale so vast it was hidden in plain sight for centuries. For generations, the prevailing image of the Amazon rainforest was that of a pristine wilderness, a green hell, largely untouched by human hands, except for small, nomadic tribes living in harmony with an unforgiving environment. This narrative suggested that the sheer density of the jungle, the poor quality of its soils, and the challenges of survival had prevented the rise of the kind of large-scale, complex societies that transformed other parts of the ancient Americas. It was a story that made intuitive sense, but it was fundamentally wrong. The truth began to emerge from an unexpected source, the clearing of land for modern cattle ranches. As vast tracts of forest were bulldozed in the late 20th century, a startling new picture literally came to light. Etched into the exposed earth were the faint but unmistakable outlines of massive geometric shapes, perfect circles, squares, and octagons connected by straight, wide avenues and surrounded by deep, defensive ditches. These were not natural formations, they were geoglyphs, giant earthworks created by human hands. The scale of this discovery is almost incomprehensible. To date, using satellite imagery and aerial surveys, researchers have identified over 450 of these structures in the southwestern Amazon alone, concentrated in the Brazilian state of Acre, with likely thousands more waiting to be discovered under the remaining canopy. The sheer physicality of these earthworks shatters the old paradigm. These are not small garden plots or temporary villages. The ditches can be up to 30 feet wide and 10 feet deep, and the embankments they create can stretch for hundreds of feet, forming precise geometric patterns that cover areas larger than many modern city blocks. The amount of earth moved to create just one of these enclosures would have required a monumental, coordinated effort, the kind of labor that implies a centralized authority capable of organizing thousands of people. This was not the work of scattered, nomadic bands. It points to a settled, stratified society with sophisticated engineering knowledge and a deep understanding of geometry. The structures are not randomly placed. They follow the local topography, often situated on high ground overlooking seasonal floodplains, and they are not isolated. They form a network, suggesting a populated, organized landscape. This discovery forces a complete re-evaluation of what was possible in the Amazon. We are not looking at a virgin forest, but at a carefully managed, anthropogenic landscape, an environment that was profoundly shaped by its human inhabitants over thousands of years. But what was the purpose of these colossal clearings? Unlike the Nazca Lines, these geoglyphs were not primarily artistic. They were functional. The leading theory suggests they served as ceremonial and defensive centers for a large, settled population. The ditches and embankments would have formed effective barriers, controlling access and providing protection. Yet, curiously, there is little evidence of large-scale warfare, such as weapon trauma on skeletal remains found nearby. This has led some researchers to propose that their function was more symbolic than militaristic, marking a sacred, segregated space for rituals and community gatherings. The layouts, often featuring a central plaza surrounded by banks, are reminiscent of the plazas found in later Amazonian societies, which were central to social and religious life. Another compelling possibility is that these sites were part of an integrated system of land and resource management. The ditches may have served as drainage channels in the seasonally flooded terrain, while the raised embankments could have been platforms for homes or for cultivating useful trees and plants. The Amazonian soil, known as terra preta or black earth, provides a crucial clue. This is not natural soil. It is a human-made supersoil, rich in charcoal, organic matter, and nutrients, created by centuries of intentional burning and waste disposal. Vast patches of terra preta are found throughout the Amazon, demonstrating that ancient peoples actively enriched the poor rainforest soil to support large-scale agriculture. The geoglyph sites are often associated with these fertile patches, suggesting a society that was not just surviving, but thriving by engineering its own ecosystem. The people who built this managed world are now known as the Amazonian geoglyph culture, and they flourished from around 2,000 years ago until just before European contact. They left behind no grand stone pyramids or carved stelae. Their monuments were made of earth, designed to be integrated with the forest. Their disappearance, like so many others, was likely triggered by the catastrophic wave of diseases introduced by Europeans, which swept through the Americas long before many explorers ever set foot in the interior. The jungle quickly reclaimed their clearings, burying their achievements under a canopy of green, and preserving them only as subtle impressions on the land. The revelation of the geoglyphs is more than just the discovery of another lost civilization. It is a paradigm shift in our understanding of the Amazon and humanity's relationship with tropical environments. It shows us that the world's largest rainforest is not an untouched wilderness, but a living library of ancient human ingenuity. It proves that complex societies can flourish in environments we once thought were too challenging, if they possess the knowledge to work with the land rather than simply dominate it. These earthworks are a silent testament to a lost chapter of human history, a story of large-scale societies that mastered the Amazon, creating a landscape of meaning and community that has only just begun to whisper its secrets to the modern world. The revelation of the Amazonian geoglyphs was just the beginning. For decades, their full extent remained obscured by the very jungle that had preserved them. Uncovering these structures on the ground was a Herculean task, requiring back-breaking labor to clear dense vegetation, only to reveal fragments of the whole picture. The true breakthrough, the technological key that unlocked the scale of this mystery, arrived from the sky in the form of LiDAR. This technology, which stands for light detection and ranging, has fundamentally revolutionized our ability to see the unseen. Imagine an aircraft flying over the endless green canopy, firing millions of laser pulses per second toward the ground. Most of these pulses are reflected back by the leaves and branches of the trees, but a small fraction manage to penetrate through gaps in the canopy, hitting the ground and returning to the sensor. By meticulously measuring the time it takes for each pulse to return, a computer can filter out the noise of the vegetation and generate an incredibly precise, three-dimensional map of the bare earth below. It's like having the power to digitally strip away the entire forest, revealing the ancient human footprint etched into the landscape beneath. This is not merely an improvement in mapping, it is a whole new way of seeing, a form of archaeological X-ray vision. What LiDAR revealed in the Amazon was nothing short of breathtaking. The isolated geoglyphs discovered by ranchers were not lone monuments. They were merely the most visible components of an astonishingly vast and complex network of settlements, roads, and earthworks. The scans showed that these ceremonial enclosures were often nodes within a sprawling, interconnected system. Wide, straight causeways, raised high above the seasonal floodwaters, linked these centers together, sometimes stretching for dozens of miles. The imagery also revealed the outlines of countless villages, complete with plazas, defensive ditches, and what appear to be agricultural areas. The scale of human occupation was orders of magnitude greater than anyone had previously imagined. This was not a smattering of small communities clinging to survival. This was a veritable civilization that had transformed the Amazon basin into a managed, engineered landscape. The old estimate that the pre-Columbian Amazon could only support around 2 million people has been completely overturned. Leading researchers now suggest the population could have been 8, 10, or even 20 million people at its peak, living in complex societies that rivaled their contemporaries in other parts of the world. This discovery forces a complete paradigm shift in our understanding of the Amazon's carrying capacity, the number of people an environment can sustainably support. The key to supporting such a large population lies in the mysterious, fertile soil known as terra preta, or black earth. Found in patches scattered throughout the basin, this is not a natural geological formation. It is a human-made supersoil, a testament to ancient Amazonian agroecology. Terra preta is rich in charcoal, organic waste like fish bones and turtle shells, manure, and pottery shards. This combination creates an incredibly nutrient-rich and self-regenerating soil that remains fertile for centuries, unlike the naturally thin, nutrient-poor soils typical of the rainforest. The creation of terra preta was not accidental. It was a deliberate, sophisticated land management strategy. By creating this fertile ground, the Amazonian geoglyph culture could practice intensive, sustainable agriculture on a scale sufficient to feed vast numbers of people. They were not passive inhabitants of the forest, they were active engineers of their ecosystem, cultivating a diverse array of crops like manioc, squash, and fruit trees within these enriched zones. The geoglyph sites themselves were likely integrated into this system, with the ditches managing water and the embankments providing elevated ground for habitation and cultivation. This challenges the very definition of a pristine wilderness. The Amazon we see today is not a virgin forest untouched by time, but a landscape that has been profoundly shaped by human hands for thousands of years. It is a garden, once carefully tended, that has since grown wild. The implications of this are staggering, reaching far beyond the field of archaeology. It rewrites the environmental history of the Americas and forces us to reconsider how we approach the Amazon's future. The narrative of the empty jungle provided a justification for its uncontrolled exploitation in the modern era. If it was just an untouched wilderness, then developing it was seen as putting empty land to use. But we now know that this wilderness is actually a cultural heritage site on a continental scale, a monument to a lost way of life that achieved a remarkable balance with a challenging environment. The practices of the ancient Amazonians, specifically their creation of terra preta, offer valuable lessons for modern sustainable agriculture and carbon sequestration, showing how humans can enrich rather than deplete their environment. The disappearance of this civilization is itself a haunting mystery. There is little evidence of a sudden, violent collapse. Instead, it is almost certain that these thriving societies were utterly devastated by diseases introduced by European explorers, which raced ahead of the colonists themselves. The population collapsed so completely and so rapidly that the forest quickly reclaimed their fields, roads, and earthworks, leaving only the subtle, geometric ghosts that LIDAR has now brought back to light. The true mystery of the Amazonian geoglyphs, therefore, is not just who built them, but what they represent, a lost model of civilization that mastered the art of living in the tropics without destroying them, a secret history of the Amazon written not in stone, but in the very soil and shape of the land. While we often marvel at the monumental architecture left behind by ancient cultures, some of their most breathtaking achievements were not carved from stone, but forged in fire and perfected through a stunning understanding of materials science. Across the Americas, metallurgists developed techniques so advanced, and in some cases, so unique that they rivaled and even surpassed the skills of their contemporaries in Europe and Asia, all without any contact with the Old World. This independent technological revolution reveals a genius for innovation that was perfectly tailored to the resources and spiritual needs of their own world. Among the most brilliant of these metalworkers were the Mach of Peru's northern coast, who mastered an astonishing chemical process that gave them the power to make solid copper objects shimmer with the radiant, untarnishable gleam of pure gold. The Mach technique, known today as electrochemical replacement plating, or sometimes misnamed as depletion gilding, was a sophisticated multi-step art that blurred the line between chemistry and magic. An artisan would start by crafting an object from copper, a metal readily available in the Andes. They would then create a paste or a paint using a mixture of minerals, including a gold-containing ore like malachite, common salt, and an acidic corrosive agent, possibly from fermented urine or local plant juices. This paste was carefully applied to the surface of the copper object, which was then placed in a specially prepared kiln and heated to a carefully controlled temperature, not hot enough to melt the metals, but sufficiently hot to trigger a complex chemical reaction. In this controlled heat, the copper at the surface would dissolve, and the gold ions in the paste would simultaneously bond to the object, creating an incredibly thin but remarkably durable and uniform layer of pure gold. The final step involved burnishing the cooled object with a smooth stone, polishing the gold surface to a brilliant, mirror-like finish. The result was a piece that appeared to be made of solid gold, but which used a fraction of the precious metal. This was not a simple coating, it was a molecular-level fusion. The Mach used this method to create spectacular ceremonial artifacts, like the famous golden mask of the Lord of Sipan, where the lustrous gold face would have captured the flickering light of torches, enhancing the divine aura of the ruler who wore it. This technology demonstrates a profound, empirical understanding of chemical principles that would not be formally described in Europe for over 1,000 years. Yet, if the Mach's work with gold seems miraculous, the achievements of another culture, far to the north along the Pacific coast of what is now Ecuador and Colombia, defy the very limits of what was thought possible in the ancient world. The Tumaco-La Tolida culture, which flourished from around 600 before Common Era to 350 Common Era, accomplished a metallurgical feat that was utterly unique. They learned to work with platinum. This is a metal that poses an almost insurmountable challenge to ancient smiths. Platinum has an extraordinarily high melting point of over 3,200 degrees Fahrenheit, a temperature impossible to achieve with pre-Columbian furnace technology. Without the ability to melt it, how could they possibly craft it into artifacts? The solution the Tumaco-La Tolida people developed was one of breathtaking ingenuity. They discovered that platinum, found in alluvial deposits as small, metallic grains in river sands, could be worked using a technique called sintering. They would take these tiny, naturally occurring platinum nuggets and mix them with a small amount of gold dust. The gold, which has a much lower melting point, would act as a solder. They would then heat the mixture in a charcoal furnace to a temperature just high enough to melt the gold, which would flow around the platinum grains, binding them together like a metallic glue. The resulting lump of metal was then painstakingly hammered and annealed, heated, and cooled repeatedly to forge it into a solid, cohesive mass. Using this method, they crafted exquisite nose rings, ear ornaments, and small figurines that were incredibly strong and had a distinctive, beautiful silvery white luster. This sintering process was a technological marvel, a method for fusing a refractory metal that was completely unknown anywhere else on the planet until the industrial era in Europe. It stands as a powerful testament to the innovative spirit of ancient American engineers. The deeper mystery surrounding these advanced skills is not just how they were developed, but why they took the specific forms they did. In the Old World, the primary driver of metallurgy was often military or economic, the need for superior weapons like bronze and steel swords, and the creation of durable tools for agriculture and construction. In the Americas, however, the focus was overwhelmingly spiritual, ceremonial, and symbolic. Gold was not valued as a currency but as a sacred substance, often referred to as the sweat of the sun, and silver as the tears of the moon. The goal of metallurgy was to create objects of power and beauty that would connect the wearer, usually a ruler or a priest, to the divine realm. This fundamental difference in purpose led to a divergent technological path. Instead of focusing on creating harder alloys for weaponry, ancient American metallurgists perfected the arts of gilding, plating, and intricate lost wax casting to produce objects of immense symbolic weight. They developed tembaga, a versatile alloy of gold and copper that was easier to cast than pure gold and could be treated with acids to dissolve the copper from the surface, leaving a porous, pure gold finish that could be polished to a high shine. This independent path of invention, driven by a unique worldview, produced a suite of technologies that were perfectly adapted to their cultural needs. The story of ancient American metallurgy is therefore not one of catching up to the rest of the world, but of a brilliant, parallel evolution, a testament to the boundless creativity of the human mind when faced with the materials at hand and the profound desire to create objects of lasting meaning and power. This shared fascination with the heavens, this drive to map the cosmos, was not confined to a single culture or region. It emerges again and again, a brilliant and recurring theme across the entire tapestry of the ancient Americas. From the jungles of the Maya to the river valleys of North America and the cloud forests of the Andes, we find evidence of a deep, sophisticated astronomical knowledge that guided everything from agriculture to architecture to the very foundations of spiritual belief. The question this pattern raises is as profound as the alignments themselves. Did these ideas travel along trade routes, passed from one civilization to the next? Or are we witnessing the awesome power of the human mind, independently arriving at similar profound truths under the same star-filled sky? The Maya, as we've seen, were arguably the master astronomers of the ancient world. Their obsession with time and celestial cycles was woven into the fabric of their existence. At sites like Capon in Honduras, the architecture itself becomes a precise astronomical instrument. The famous hieroglyphic stairway is not just a record of kings. Its alignment captures the extreme southerly setting of the planet Venus, a body they associated with war and omens. In the Dresden Codex, one of the few surviving Maya books, we find complex tables that could predict solar eclipses and track the synodic periods of Mars and Mercury with astonishing accuracy. This wasn't merely observation for its own sake, it was a form of divination. By understanding the predictable cycles of the gods in the sky, the Maya believed they could foresee and influence events on Earth, cementing the power of their rulers who served as intermediaries between the celestial and terrestrial realms. Their calendar, a marvel of interlocking cycles, was the ultimate expression of this belief, a grand cosmic clock that ordered their universe. A world away, in the heart of North America, the great city of Cahokia also oriented its very layout to the rhythms of the cosmos. The central axis of the city, running through the monumental Monk's Mound, is a line just 5 degrees off true north-south, an impressive feat of engineering for its time. But it is the Woodhenge that speaks most clearly to their celestial knowledge. This circle of towering red cedar posts was far more than a simple calendar. While its primary function was undoubtedly to mark the solstices and equinoxes, vital information for knowing when to plant and harvest the maize that sustained their massive population, its purpose was likely far more profound. Imagine the scene on a dawn like the summer solstice. The community's leaders, perhaps priests or rulers, would gather at the central observation post. As the sun broke the horizon, its rays would align perfectly with a specific post on the circumference, bathing the ceremony in a dramatic, calculated light. This public demonstration of astronomical prediction was a powerful tool of social control. It visually reinforced the authority of the elite, proving their unique ability to communicate with the forces that governed life itself. The Woodhenge was not just a tool, it was a theater of power, with the sun and moon as the lead actors. High in the Andes, the Inca took this concept of sacred astronomy and carved it directly into the living rock of their mountaintop citadels. At the crown jewel of Inca architecture, Machu Picchu, lies one of the most evocative and enigmatic astronomical artifacts, the Teotihuacan stone. The name translates roughly to the hitching post of the sun, and its function is a masterpiece of both engineering and symbolism. Carved from a single outcrop of granite, the stone is a precisely shaped pillar rising from a tiered base. Its angles and facets are not arbitrary. They are calibrated to the specific latitude of Machu Picchu. During the 2 annual equinoxes, the sun stands almost directly overhead at noon, casting no shadow from the pillar. For the Inca, this was a moment of critical importance. They believed the sun was tied to the earth, and at the solstices, when it reached its furthest points north and south, it was in danger of breaking free and plunging the world into eternal darkness. The Intihuatana was the ceremonial anchor, the place where the Inca emperor, the Sapa Inca, would perform rituals to tie down the sun and ensure its return, guaranteeing the continuation of the seasons and the fertility of the land. It is a perfect fusion of the practical and the spiritual, a stone clock and an altar to the sun god, Inti, all in one. When we step back and look at this panorama, from the Maya codices to the Cahokia Woodhenge to the Intihuatana, the similarities in intent are striking. All 3 civilizations, separated by thousands of miles and centuries, saw a direct causal link between celestial events and earthly life. They all invested tremendous effort in building precise, permanent structures to observe and mark these events. And they all used this astronomical knowledge to legitimize and centralize political and religious authority. So, does this suggest a shared, diffused knowledge? While there was certainly long-distance trade, with goods like macaw feathers from Mesoamerica found at Cahokia and cacao from the tropics reaching the southwest. The transmission of complex, abstract astronomical principles is harder to trace. It is more likely that we are seeing the result of independent, parallel discovery. Any sedentary, agricultural society living under a clear sky is going to notice the same fundamental patterns: the sun's changing path, the phases of the moon, the predictable wanderings of the brightest planets. The drive to understand these patterns, to find order in the cosmos, appears to be a universal human impulse. What differs is the cultural meaning assigned to them. For the Maya, it was a complex theology of time and destiny. For the Cahokians, it was a demonstration of earthly power linked to agricultural cycles. For the Inca, it was a direct, intimate relationship with a sun god that their emperor could literally influence. The heavens were a constant, but the stories they inspired were as unique as the civilizations that gazed upon them, each finding its own reflection in the infinite expanse above. But what if the story of the ancient Americas is even more interconnected than we've imagined? What if, long before Columbus, the vast oceans that supposedly isolated this hemisphere were not barriers, but highways? This brings us to one of the most controversial and captivating fields of inquiry: the enigma of transoceanic contact. The conventional narrative teaches that the Americas were peopled by migrations across the Bering Land Bridge, and then developed in complete isolation for thousands of years until 1492. Yet a host of intriguing, if hotly debated, artifacts and similarities have led some researchers to propose a radical alternative: that voyagers from other parts of the world, Romans, Phoenicians, even Chinese explorers, may have reached American shores centuries or even millennia before European ships ever set sail. One of the most famous pieces of evidence cited is the story of the Texas Roman coins. In the 1930s, a collection of ancient coins was reportedly found near a burial site close to the Rio Grande. Among them were coins identified as originating from the Roman Empire, some dating as far back as the reign of Emperor Constantine in the 4th century. For proponents of pre-Columbian contact, this was potential proof that Roman vessels, perhaps blown off course, had made landfall in the Gulf of Mexico. The idea is not entirely far-fetched when we consider Roman maritime technology. Their ships were certainly capable of long-distance travel across the Mediterranean and even into the Atlantic. However, the mainstream archaeological view remains deeply skeptical. The provenance of the coins is the primary issue. They were not discovered during a controlled archaeological excavation, but were found by individuals, and the exact context of their burial is unclear. This opens the possibility that they were dropped by a modern collector or were part of a hoax. Without a secure archaeological context, found within a datable layer of soil alongside other artifacts from a specific period, they cannot be considered reliable evidence. They are an anomaly, and in archaeology, anomalies require extraordinary proof. A similar mystery swirls around the stone heads of the Olmecs. As we discussed earlier, these colossal sculptures depict individuals with unique, realistic features. Some observers have pointed out that certain heads have broad, flat noses and full lips, characteristics that they argue bear a striking resemblance to people of African descent. This has fueled the theory, popularized by figures like Ivan van Sertima in his book, They Came Before Columbus, that West African voyagers, specifically from the Mali Empire or other Nubian kingdoms, crossed the Atlantic and influenced early Mesoamerican civilization. The visual comparison is certainly compelling at first glance. Yet, archaeologists and physical anthropologists offer a different interpretation. They argue that the features seen on the Olmec heads fall entirely within the spectrum of physical diversity present in indigenous American populations, both ancient and modern. The idea that these features must be explained by an external African influence is itself based on a limited view of Native American phenotypes. Furthermore, there is no genetic, linguistic, or archaeological evidence in the Olmec heartland, no distinctively African artifacts, no sudden technological changes that would support a sustained contact or influence of the scale required to inspire such monumental portraiture. The Olmec heads are more plausibly seen as powerful representations of their own local rulers. Beyond the Atlantic, Theories have also been proposed for contact across the Pacific. The most prominent of these involves the legendary Chinese explorer Zheng He, who in the early 15th century commanded a massive treasure fleet that sailed throughout the Indian Ocean. A controversial map, known as the Zheng He map, supposedly copies an earlier chart that depicts the Americas with surprising accuracy. While this has been used to suggest that Chinese explorers mapped the New World decades before Columbus, the map is almost certainly a modern forgery. A more persistent idea points to the sweet potato. This staple crop, central to many American civilizations, was somehow present in Polynesia before European contact. The scientific name for the sweet potato, Ipomoea batatas, and its Polynesian name, cumara, are strikingly similar to the word for the vegetable in some Andean languages, cumul. This linguistic and botanical link is, for many, the strongest evidence for pre-Columbian transoceanic contact, suggesting that Polynesian voyagers, the greatest navigators in human history, who settled islands across the vast Pacific, might have reached the coast of South America and returned with the sweet potato. This theory is gaining more traction, as genetic studies of the sweet potato confirm its American origin and its presence in Oceania before 1492. The possibility of Polynesian-American contact is now taken seriously by many scholars, representing a plausible and limited interaction that stands in contrast to the grander claims of Roman or African empires influencing Maya or Olmec state formation. So why does mainstream archaeology remain so cautious about these theories? The answer lies in the standard of evidence. Archaeology operates on the principle of parsimony, often called Occam's razor. The simplest explanation that accounts for all the facts is usually the correct one. For most of the developments in the ancient Americas, the pyramid building, the writing systems, the complex calendars, the simplest explanation is independent invention. Human beings, when faced with similar challenges like tracking time, honoring gods, or organizing large societies, are perfectly capable of arriving at similar solutions without any contact. The pyramid form, for instance, is a stable and logical way to build a tall, impressive structure, and it appeared independently in Egypt, Mesopotamia, and Mesoamerica. The burden of proof, therefore, rests on those claiming contact. They must demonstrate not just a similarity, but the presence of actual, datable artifacts from the Old World in a secure New World archaeological context, or provide unmistakable genetic or linguistic evidence that cannot be explained by common ancestry from the original Bering migrations. While the sweet potato and potential Polynesian contact show that isolation may not have been absolute, the case for large-scale, culture-changing transoceanic voyages remains, for now, within the compelling but unproven realm of mystery. These theories challenge us to keep an open mind about the capabilities of ancient seafarers, while also reminding us of the rigorous standards required to rewrite the history books. Yet, even as we consider the possibility of physical contact across oceans, there is undeniable evidence of a different kind of voyage, a journey of ideas that traverse the landscape of Mesoamerica with profound and lasting impact. This brings us to one of the most powerful and unifying themes in the entire ancient American world, the ubiquitous presence of the feathered serpent deity. From the windy plains of Teotihuacan to the humid jungles of the Yucatan and the highland valleys of the Aztec Empire, this compelling figure appears and reappears over more than a millennium. Known by different names, Quetzalcoatl to the Aztecs, Kukulkan to the Maya, and simply the feathered serpent in the earlier city of Teotihuacan, this god embodies a complex set of ideals that seem to have resonated deeply across cultures and centuries. The very image is a study in symbolic fusion. The serpent, a creature of the earth, representing terrestrial power, wisdom, and sometimes danger, combined with the feathers of the Quetzal bird, a being of the air, symbolizing the heavens, spirit, and ethereal beauty. This combination of earth and sky suggests a being that bridges worlds, a mediator between the physical and the divine. The story of this deity begins at the heart of the mysterious city of Teotihuacan. Here, long before the rise of the Aztecs, the feathered serpent was a central figure in the city's spiritual life. The most dramatic testament to its importance is the Ciudadela, a massive sunken plaza that contains the Temple of the Feathered Serpent. This pyramid is adorned with a succession of stark, alternating heads, one representing the feathered serpent, with its plumed collar, and the other a more fearsome entity, likely a serpent of fire or war. This pairing suggests a duality, a balance between creative and destructive forces. The temple was more than a place of worship, it was also a tomb. Excavations have revealed the skeletons of over 200 individuals, many of them warriors, buried as offerings to consecrate the structure. This indicates that from its earliest appearances, the feathered serpent was associated with both life-giving wisdom and the sacred violence necessary to sustain the cosmic order. Centuries after the fall of Teotihuacan, the concept of the feathered serpent re-emerged with renewed vigor among the Maya, particularly during the terminal classic period. Here, the god was known as Kukulkan, and his influence is spectacularly visible at the great city of Chichen Itza. The most breathtaking example is the step pyramid known as El Castillo, which is a giant solar and astronomical calendar in stone. Each face of the pyramid has 91 steps, which, with the shared top platform, totals 365, the number of days in the solar year. But the true magic happens during the spring and autumn equinoxes. As the sun sets, the corner of the pyramid casts a series of triangular shadows down the northern staircase, which align with stone serpent heads at the base. The effect is a stunning illusion of a massive, undulating serpent slithering down from the heavens to the earth. This phenomenon was a public demonstration of divine power, directly linking the ruler to Kukulkan and the celestial cycles. The cult of Kukulkan at Chichen Itza is often associated with a more militaristic and commercial society, suggesting the deity's role had evolved to also legitimize political power and economic expansion. By the time the Aztecs rose to power in the 14th century, the feathered serpent had become one of the most complex and important gods in their pantheon, Quetzalcoatl. For the Aztecs, he was the god of wind, the morning star, wisdom, and most importantly, the patron of priests and artisans. He was credited with the discovery of maize, the creation of humanity, and the invention of the calendar. Crucially, Aztec mythology wove Quetzalcoatl into a dramatic and fateful narrative. They told of a priest-king of the legendary Toltecs, a ruler named Quetzalcoatl, who was a wise and peaceful leader. He was opposed by a dark rival, Tezcatlipoca, who through trickery forced Quetzalcoatl into disgrace and exile. The legend says he departed eastward across the sea on a raft of serpents, but he promised one day to return, in a certain year on the Aztec calendar. This prophecy would have catastrophic consequences, for when Spanish ships arrived under Hernán Cortés in 1519, the Aztec Emperor Moctezuma Roman II initially feared that it might be the returning Quetzalcoatl. This cultural misunderstanding, born from a deep-seated myth, arguably contributed to the empire's rapid downfall. So, what does this persistent, evolving figure tell us? Does the spread of the feathered serpent from Teotihuacan to the Maya, and finally to the Aztecs, indicate direct cultural transmission? A case of religious ideas being carried by trade, migration, or even conquest? Or does it point to something even more fundamental about the human psyche? The diffusionist argument is strong. We see the architectural and artistic styles of Teotihuacan influencing Maya cities like Tikal during the classic period. It is entirely plausible that the concept of this powerful deity traveled along the same trade routes as obsidian, jade, and feathers. The Maya version, Kukulkan, becomes particularly prominent after what appears to be an influence, or even an invasion, from central Mexico, suggesting the idea was imported and then adapted to local beliefs. However, the alternative explanation is perhaps even more compelling. The feathered serpent may be a powerful archetype, a symbol that arose independently in different cultures because it represents universal human concerns. The serpent is a near-universal symbol of rebirth and renewal due to its ability to shed its skin. The bird represents ascension and connection to the spiritual world. Combining them creates a natural symbol for a mediator, a being that can bring the life-giving forces of rain and wind from the heavens to the earth, which is precisely what an agricultural society would revere. The idea of a plumed serpent may have simply emerged in multiple places as a logical expression of a prayer for fertility and wisdom. The similarities, then, might not be due to borrowing, but to parallel spiritual intuition. The true power of the feathered serpent lies in this duality. It is both a specific historical figure, whose cult can be traced through time, and a timeless archetype that speaks to a deep, shared human desire to connect the earthly and the divine. It stands as a testament not just to the interconnectedness of Mesoamerican cultures, but to the universal capacity of the human imagination to create symbols of profound and enduring meaning. But just as we explore the potential for ideas to travel across the sea, we are confronted with a mystery that suggests the journey might have been made by the substances themselves, creating a historical puzzle so bizarre it seems ripped from the pages of a detective novel. It begins not in the Americas, but in the dusty halls of European museums with the ancient bodies of Egyptian pharaohs. In the 1990s, a German toxicologist named Dr. Svetlana Balabanova was conducting routine analyses on tissue samples from several Egyptian mummies, including the well-preserved remains of a priestess named Hinat Toi. She was testing for the presence of known ancient drugs and medicines, like opium, expecting to find traces consistent with the flora of the Mediterranean and Near East. But her results revealed something that should have been impossible. The mummies, entombed for over 3,000 years, long before the age of European exploration, tested positive for two powerful alkaloids, cocaine and nicotine. The implications of this discovery were staggering. Cocaine is derived from the coca plant, which is native exclusively to the Andes Mountains of South America. Nicotine, while present in small amounts in some Old World plants like henbane, is most strongly associated with tobacco, a plant that evolved in the Americas. According to everything we know about history, these substances were utterly unknown in Africa or Europe until after Christopher Columbus's voyages in the late 15th century. So how did they end up inside the bodies of Egyptian nobility who lived and died a millennium before the Common Era? Dr. Balabanova, a highly respected scientist, was as shocked as anyone. She repeated her tests multiple times, using multiple methodologies like gas chromatography and mass spectrometry, each time yielding the same inexplicable results. Other researchers soon tested mummies in other collections, including those at the British Museum, and found similar traces of nicotine. The evidence was chemically robust, but historically untenable, creating a paradox that has divided experts ever since. One of the most radical theories proposed to solve this puzzle is the existence of pre-Columbian transoceanic trade routes. Could ancient seafarers have established contact between the continents thousands of years before we thought? Proponents of this idea point to the remarkable maritime capabilities of certain ancient cultures. The Egyptians themselves were adept sailors on the Red Sea and may have had connections with civilizations further south. Perhaps a chain of trade, a kind of ancient Silk Road of the sea, could have facilitated the exchange of goods. Imagine Phoenician merchants, the great traders of the ancient Mediterranean, venturing out past the Pillars of Hercules and down the coast of Africa. From there, could currents have carried them across the Atlantic to the Americas, or could they have connected with a network of traders who passed these exotic plants from hand to hand across the Pacific? It's a thrilling idea, suggesting a globe that was far more interconnected in antiquity than our textbooks allow. If true, it would mean that goods like coca leaves or tobacco, which could have been preserved for long journeys, were prized as luxury items or medicinal curiosities by Egyptian elites, finding their way into the afterlife with their owners. However, this theory faces immense, and many would say insurmountable, logistical hurdles. There is a complete absence of any supporting archaeological evidence. Not a single shred of pre-Columbian coca leaf, tobacco pipe, or depiction of these American plants has ever been found in a datable archaeological context in Egypt, Europe, or anywhere else in the Old World. Furthermore, the journey across the open ocean would have been phenomenally dangerous and long, with no guarantee of a return. While we should not underestimate ancient ingenuity, the case for sustained, meaningful contact strong enough to establish a trade in perishable botanical products remains exceedingly thin. A second, more cautious theory suggests the answer might lie in misidentification. Perhaps the cocaine and nicotine came from as yet unknown Old World plants that produced the same or similar chemical compounds. The natural world is vast, and many plant species have become extinct or remain undiscovered by modern science. It is conceivable that a species of coca or tobacco once grew in Africa or Asia and then died out, leaving no trace in the historical or botanical record beyond these chemical signatures in the mummies. While possible, this explanation is considered unlikely by botanists, as the specific alkaloid profiles are highly distinctive to their known American plant families. The burden of proof rests on those claiming an extinct source, requiring evidence that does not currently exist. The most widely accepted explanation within the mainstream scientific community is also the most mundane: contamination. Mummies in museum collections have not been kept in sterile conditions. In the 19th and early 20th centuries, they were often handled extensively, used in public, unwrapping events, and restored with materials like tobacco leaves or modern glues. Could the samples have been contaminated during their excavation, transport, or storage? Modern forensic science is incredibly sensitive, and it is possible that even minuscule amounts of contamination from, for instance, a curator who smoked a cigarette while handling the mummy decades ago, could be detected centuries later. Similarly, the tools used to take tissue samples might not have been perfectly sterilized. Proponents of the contamination theory argue that until a mummy is tested that has been sealed in its sarcophagus since antiquity and is sampled using absolutely sterile, modern archaeological techniques, the results cannot be considered conclusive. The debate over the cocaine mummies ultimately hinges on this critical point of provenance. It is a classic conflict between a scientific result and the historical record. The chemical data is clear, but the context in which that data was collected is potentially flawed. This leaves us with a tantalizing enigma that is yet to be definitively solved. It serves as a powerful reminder that the past is never as simple as it seems, and that even the most advanced scientific tools can sometimes reveal mysteries faster than they can provide answers. This powerful legend, however, was not just a tale of the distant past. It was woven into a specific prophecy with a terrifying deadline. The Aztec calendar moved in cycles, and the year the Spaniards made landfall, a year the Aztecs called one reed, or Ciacatl, was precisely the year prophesied for the possible return of Quetzalcoatl. So, when reports reached the Aztec capital of Tenochtitlan describing strange, tall men with pale skin and beards arriving from the east on massive floating houses, the psychological impact on the emperor, Moctezuma Roman II, must have been paralyzing. These strangers possessed technology that seemed like magic. They rode giant, unknown beasts. Their bodies were clad in a substance that glittered like the scales of a serpent, and they wielded weapons that roared with thunder and spat fire. To a mind steeped in the Quetzalcoatl myth, these were not just foreign invaders. They were the literal fulfillment of an ancient divine promise, or perhaps a threat. Moctezuma's response was not the immediate, decisive military action one might expect from the ruler of a powerful and warlike empire. Instead, he hesitated, consumed by a deep-seated religious and political dilemma. Was this the benevolent god-king returning to reclaim his rightful throne, or was it a terrible trick played by his divine adversary, Tezcatlipoca? Moctezuma embarked on a cautious strategy of appeasement and testing. He sent a succession of lavish embassies to the coast, bearing gifts of gold, magnificent featherwork, and other treasures fit for a deity. On one hand, these gifts were intended to honor a potential god. On the other, they were a sophisticated form of reconnaissance, allowing Moctezuma's messengers to gauge the strangers' numbers, their intentions, and, most importantly, their true nature. Were these beings mortal men, susceptible to hunger, greed, and fear, or were they truly divine and incorruptible? Tragically for the Aztecs, the gifts of gold had the opposite of the intended effect. Instead of satisfying the newcomers, they only inflamed their insatiable lust for plunder, confirming to Cortés that he had indeed found a land of unimaginable wealth. This initial hesitation proved to be a catastrophic strategic error. It gave Cortés and his small band of conquistadors precious time to move inland, to form alliances with the many rival city-states and subject peoples who bitterly resented Aztec domination and the heavy tribute of goods and human sacrifices demanded from them. The Spanish force was not an army of thousands, it was a few hundred men. Their success was not achieved through superior numbers, but through the exploitation of a profound political vulnerability that Moctezuma's indecision had created. By the time the Spaniards reached the magnificent island city of Tenochtitlan, Moctezuma, still trapped by the ambiguity of the prophecy, made the fateful decision to welcome Cortés into the heart of his empire as an honored guest, not an enemy. He effectively invited the wolf into the sheepfold. Once inside the city, Cortés swiftly turned the situation to his advantage, eventually taking Moctezuma hostage and ruling the empire through him as a puppet, a move that shattered Aztec morale and crippled their ability to mount a coordinated defense. The question that historians have debated for centuries is just how decisive this Quetzalcoatl factor truly was. Could the Aztec Empire, with its powerful armies and formidable martial tradition, have crushed the Spanish expedition if Moctezuma had acted with immediate and ruthless force upon their arrival? It is a compelling counterfactual. Some scholars argue that the myth was merely a post-conquest fabrication, a story spread by the Aztecs themselves to explain the inexplicable collapse of their world, or by the Spanish to legitimize their conquest as a divinely ordained replacement of one ruler by another. Yet, the legend of the returning god predates the conquest in other Mesoamerican sources, giving it significant weight. The most plausible interpretation lies in a middle ground. The prophecy did not cause the conquest. European steel, gunpowder, disease, and indigenous alliances did that. But what the myth of the white god provided was a critical psychological opening. It created a paralysis at the very top of the Aztec state, a moment of catastrophic doubt that prevented a swift, unified response during the most vulnerable period of the invasion. It was the crack in the empire's foundation that allowed the Spanish wedge to be driven in. The collision of these two worlds was not just a meeting of armies, but a clash of cosmologies, where a deeply held belief, however misinterpreted, altered the calculus of power and helped topple an empire, leaving us to wonder how differently history might have unfolded if that particular myth had never been told. And so our journey across continents and through millennia comes to a close, for now. We have stood beneath the immense, stoic gaze of the Olmec heads and traced the colossal lines of the Nazca Desert from the air. We have wandered the silent plazas of abandoned Maya cities and marveled at the mathematical precision of Monk's Mound. We have peered into the cryptic carvings on the Gate of the Sun and felt the intimate presence of the Chinchorro mummies. These 25 mysteries are more than just historical footnotes. They are vibrant reminders that the story of the ancient Americas is not a simple, linear narrative, but a complex, unfinished tapestry, woven with threads of brilliance, ambition, and profound enigma. Each unanswered question, from the true purpose of the Great Serpent Mound to the silent governance of Teotihuacan, challenges the comfortable boundaries of our understanding, pushing us to see these cultures not as primitive or static, but as dynamic, innovative, and deeply sophisticated societies that developed their own unique paths to civilization. They achieved feats of engineering, astronomy, and social organization that continue to inspire awe and spark debate among the world's leading experts. The real treasure uncovered here is not a fabled city of gold, but a far richer prize, a profound appreciation for the incredible diversity of human experience and the boundless capacity for ingenuity that flourished in this hemisphere. The search for answers is far from over. In fact, it is accelerating. Every year, new technologies like LiDAR peel back the jungle canopy to reveal lost cities, while advances in genetic analysis and soil chemistry help us read the subtle stories left in bones and earth. Archaeologists are not just digging in the dirt. They are collaborating with the living descendants of these ancient cultures, weaving together scientific data with enduring oral traditions to create a more complete and respectful picture of the past. The mysteries we've explored are not static puzzles waiting for a single solution. They are living conversations evolving with each new discovery. A shard of pottery, a satellite image, or a reinterpretation of a glyph can suddenly cast an entirely new light on a centuries-old question, reminding us that history is not a closed book, but a manuscript that is constantly being edited and expanded. This relentless curiosity is what drives us forward, ensuring that the silent cities and enigmatic artifacts will never cease to challenge and fascinate us. Now, we turn the inquiry over to you. After this grand tour of mysteries, which one captured your imagination most powerfully? Does the sudden silence of the classic Maya, a civilization at its peak, haunt your thoughts? Or are you drawn to the sheer logistical wonder of the Olmecs moving 40-ton stones without wheels or beasts of burden? Perhaps the tantalizing possibility of pre-Columbian transoceanic contact, hinted at by the cocaine mummies or the sweet potato, sparks your sense of adventure. Maybe the peaceful, collective mystery of Teotihuacan's invisible rulers offers a compelling alternative vision of what a society can be. Share your thoughts and theories in the comments below. We would love to continue this exploration with you. If you enjoyed this journey to the edges of the known, be sure to subscribe to the channel and hit the notification bell, because our investigations into the deepest mysteries of history are only just beginning. Thank you for watching.